Good to go. We aren't looking for a motion, or are we?
No.
I don't think we need a motion. So the first presentation then is from our Sergeant Springham, Municipal Enforcement Services Annual Report.
Good evening.
Please take it ahead.
Actually, I'll just, Madam Chair, if I may just take a moment to introduce Sergeant Springham, if I may.
I'm sorry.
No,
I did see you sitting there.
I'm sitting quietly in the corner over here. Sergeant Springham's been with us now for about 9 months. He's doing fantastic work. I know he's eager to get presenting to the Committee of the Whole here this evening. Municipal enforcement is under the Protective Services umbrella. It's one of the 2 presentations we'll be hearing tonight from Protective Services. And with that, I'd like Sergeant Springham to go ahead with his report.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. So it's my pleasure to present to Council tonight with respect to the work of Municipal Enforcement Services for 2018. It's been a period of some transition and some evaluation for us to see what where our program is going in the future, and we do see some change coming up. And one of the things that with our stats, how it's presented, is to kind of give you that sort of frame shot view of what we're doing. One of the numbers that we really look at is our file investigation. So for 2018, our files that sitting at 1,091. We had a slight decrease from the previous year, but that, considering given the amount of numbers that we're looking at, we're really looking at what is behind those files. So I managed to broke it down into 3 distinct facets of the file. So we've broken it into non-moving traffic, parking, animal control, and other regulatory. Those numbers presented, through a 3-year period are very. There's a little bit of a trend there. I think one of the numbers that pops out at us is regarding animal control. We've taken on really a full-time capacity since the beginning of 2018, and with that, it shows with some of our numbers that are increasing slightly. I've broken it down into there's file investigations and as well as you'll see occurrence types, which might represent a slightly higher number than the file investigations, and that relates into a file may turn into some additional occurrences within that complaint. So I've listed it as if you might have an animal control complaint that starts as a dog at large, but it might turn into an animal that's not licensed. So you'll see a variance in those numbers as well. So the animal control was at the top, and the non-moving traffic was the secondary complaint that we've had the most, and that relates to either abandoned vehicles and parking issues. And then we get into some of our other regulatory work, which is really the meat and potatoes of what we do, so relating to either snow removal, unsightly properties. With our violation tickets, there was a significant drop. Now I'll just look at that as more we've had a transition in our own personnel and philosophy. Part of that is we want to go through still that compliance through education mode, and so we did see our numbers drop from just around the 910 mark to 505. But with that, we've actually had 408 warnings with that, so it's a kind of the balance of what we're trying to achieve and get out to the public. So we still want to present to public that positive image and as well as the education component, and that's trying to get out to as many community events. We dropped it slightly last year, but I anticipate once we get up to our full staffing that we're going to try to reach out and be at those events as much as we can. One of the things that's not pointed out, so a lot of that work we do with these special events relates to even the traffic control portion, so we're relied on heavily to assist on that. So but it gives us an opportunity to interact with the public as well. With our 2019 Municipal Enforcement Priorities Plan, we're incorporating that going forward with the positive youth development, unsightly properties, and traffic enforcement with warnings. Our partners in the RCMP, I think that number is presented for positive ticketing, which was 1,134 tickets. That's combined for both ourselves and the RCMP. We hope to continue on those strong numbers going forward. A couple of key things to point out with respect to maybe some new concepts coming up. Working with regional enforcement partners, so that's reaching out to Leduc County, City Leduc, Devon, Calmar. So we're really looking at information sharing and seeing what some new things that some of those communities are doing, and maybe building up sort of a regional type of information sharing. One of the things we've been also working on to improve level of service was the after-hours call service, which really represents what we had before was when we weren't on shift, that we had to rely upon voicemail. And unfortunately, sort of when you're trying to evaluate the calls, sometimes those calls were not being forwarded on directly. So with the after-hours call service, you're going to be talking to a live person that's going to be able to evaluate it and push it to the more appropriate resources. So we're starting to see some interesting trends coming out of that. We'll certainly be presenting with Chief Cook and myself, but as the year goes on, we'd like to keep improving on that. With our training, we're continuing to push with respect to being sort of all-inclusive in our departments, so that we're not being necessarily looked at as a sort of a traffic role. I firmly believe on, presenting our program in a way that it has diversity and meeting the needs of the community. One of our contract services with Black Hole Kennels is actually key. We want to ensure that we actually have a facility that, again, being the fact that we're heavily engaged in animal control as we speak, we want to make sure we have a place that we can actually put these animals in that, for the long-term future of our program. And at that, I'll open it up to council for any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Sergeant. One quick one, the phone number for that after hours, what is that?
It's the 929-7435. So all we really do at the end of the day, so when these are being manned by the administrative staff at the RCMP, they'll be the call takers, and then goes to a night service, which actually pushes it to our after-hours call service. So it's exact same number.
And that is publicized where?
Well, right now, we haven't rolled it out officially. I want us to be very cautious, make sure that the program that we do have, and that's evaluating every time, which we're doing right now, because we're trying to work out a few, some concerns and questions. Sometimes it's just the evaluation process. So it's not officially out there until right now, I guess.
And I apologize for that, but when you said the after-hours number, I hadn't heard of it, and it's the first time I heard there was one. So. Well,
I think just based on the fact that it's not a number change per se, so people will still call the exact same number they call during the day.
During the day.
Yeah, so they'll just get an actual live operator to evaluate their call, as opposed to leaving it on a voicemail, which we've had in the past.
So we're staffing that number, in other words. Is someone going to be answering the phone?
Yeah, correct, that is, yep.
Okay, appreciate that. And that was my point, and I know there's been a lot of people asking about that. I'm sorry, my phone just won't stop, and I put it on Do Not Disturb, I've shut it off, so I'm going to have to throw it in the water next.
Garbage is
Sorry about that, technology. So, sorry. Any other questions from Councilor? Yeah. Councilor Benitez.
Keeping on the path of the animal control, I guess. Even online, I still see people tagging the person who used to do the contracted service over 2 years ago or whatever. How do we know, or how can we make sure we're being effective with communicating animal control, being, under the privy of this number? It still seems there's not clarity.
Well, Councillor, part of that is, I guess, the messaging. I think that's going to be an ongoing sort of process, and I've seen it since I've started here, and a lot of things do go through social media. I think we've worked through this past year of trying to eliminate some of the old contact information We actually, I think we've got some ways to probably improve our sort of, again, this diversity that we're trying to put into our program. It really gets down to putting our own messaging out, whether it's through social media and even updating on our website. I think we've got some improvement definitely there so that we can start to, those calls eventually, once we get the messaging going forward, that they'll start to sort of trail off. But I know we've got some work ahead of us to really get people to buy into, we are your animal control program.
Yeah, just a follow, just a comment. I see that, what was it, 538 or whatever that number was that was up there. If I was to guess, I bet you that's even low for the number of times it could have been called. Right? So I'll be watching, I guess, or we'll be watching to see, if as we message more, if that number goes up. And I think it's incumbent upon us to resource accordingly because that's, it's a standalone bullet point there. It's not insignificant. So, yeah.
It's a good point, Councillor. I think that's one thing. There is an unknown number that I know I hear about it a lot. Just that whether it's a dog at large that complaint may not get to us, but it seems to get vetted through the social media prior to even us knowing about it. So, and we want to promote that.
For sure.
Councillor Hendricks was next, but I think Councillor...
Just a comment more than a question. And I think, Mike...
The same issue.
Yeah. I don't necessarily think it's your job to... I agree with Councillor Newkirk here that we need to do a better job at engaging the public. That social media is where we're getting our information. But I think this more goes to you, Mike, in the sense of all these things that we're doing. We just need to be a bit more aggressive on social media. We need to be looking at different ways as to just posting it ourselves and using the available technology that they have here, because there are those social pages out there, and there's the risk of going down that hole for sure. But we know that's where a lot of people get our information. So whether it's this or whether it's information about the senior stuff that we're doing down at Aquafit, I think we need more of an integrated approach. And I'm sure that there is one there. I'm not seeing it publicly. And so, just whenever we've got these types of things going, it's just making sure our comms guys are working collectively and integrated with these systems. So just a comment from me and Steve, obviously. Sorry, Councilman Newkirk obviously hears it a lot. I see it a lot, and I think we can be a lot more, do a better job being proactive on a lot of things.
Is there any response, Mr. Schwartz? I'll get to Councillor Hendricks.
Yes, thank you very much, Councillor Swain. We've provided some training in the last several weeks on social media and are also developing a full-blown strategy. In addition, we're adding a resource that's going to focus mainly on getting that message out to social media, through the social media avenues, and tracking some of the trends that are going on. So we're definitely making some changes in that area. We hear you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hendricks.
So removal of sidewalks, residential sidewalks, and certain properties always seem to have that field trail in front of the homes. Anytime it snows, and never does stuff up to clean. And how do you provide sort of an education push to get some of those cleaned up?
Well, I think everything comes down to we're always trying to change attitudes, and I think that's whether we're talking about traffic enforcement or any other regulatory issue. Part of our program, I think at the end of the day, I think we don't necessarily need a bylaw to tell people that, hey, it's important for you to shovel your sidewalk so that people could safely, walk down it. I think part of it is, when we get through to the appropriate messaging, whether it's, again, dealing with the communication side of it, to the point where at the end of the day, if we're being proactive on our snow removal issues, that at some point we may get into the enforcement side. And I think that's the follow through that, if you're having that sort of constant individual who's not shoveling their snow, that it's going to get down to, it's either going to be, we're cleaning it up at your cost, and here's the ticket to go with it, and then going forward throughout the year on that. I know that that is a bit of a pinch point here in Beaumont, and with the growth that it definitely needs to have a focus on that.
Is there like a warning document or something hanging on
We-
that?
Yeah, so we actually have a form that outlines basically all the requirements based on our snow removal bylaw.
Right.
And it sort of creates that initial process so that you've got this amount of time to comply with this, and if you don't comply, we'll initiate a process for either cleaning it up, and at that time you can receive a violation ticket.
Chief Cook?
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I may just add to Council, we have been running with a vacancy due to turnover in staffing in municipal enforcement. Very pleased to say that the latest round of recruitment closed on Friday, and we're in the process of shortlisting for a bylaw officer to join the team. That's already an approved position, of course. However, moving forward, we've heard very clearly from Council that Council's desire is to focus on a lot of bylaw enforcement within the community, snow removal being one. And that will be the role of this individual, bylaw enforcement. So will be a focus on that, and we anticipate within the next, say, 6 to 8 weeks, hopefully having that individual start with us on the team. So I just wanted to add that as well.
Thank you, appreciate that.
Yeah, from my
Follow up?
perspective, it's not the 2-day rule or a 3-day rule. It's the guy that left the goat trail down the middle, and then it's been stacked up and piled up forever, and you can't walk it as a result. And it's just constant yearly single. I think if nobody's ever on their door, nobody's ever just given them a heads up with a warning. It'll continue on. Next, thank you.
Thank you. Sergeant, is the community standards bylaw something that you are leading up? Is that project under your area? Chief Cook?
Sorry, Madam Chair. As a matter of fact, that's an initiative that I'm currently leading. In fact, we actually have a tentative date, I believe it is the end of May, where we'll be bringing the bylaw for first reading to Council. That is tentative. Right now, however, we have had our first initial meetings with other departments within the organization to start bringing all those pieces, if you will, to the table to address the concerns.
Just a thought on that, because I know it's usually quite complex. The community standards bylaw has a lot of pieces in it, or could.
Certainly.
And I'm wondering if that's coming to committee of the whole before it goes for first reading, or have we considered consultation so that council's up to speed on what's included and what's not?
It may very well be, and that's definitely an opportunity that we'll do, and we can ensure that. If I may just add as well, Sergeant Spring will be playing a very key role in the creation of that bylaw as well. So
I think that comes hand in hand with the enforcement and the communication and how that all goes.
Certainly.
Yeah, Councillor Stout.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Does the community standards bylaw include changes to the parking bylaw? Is that because we have discussed that in the past? Have we not? No?
Well, I think that's the one thing that we're always on a sort of constant evaluation of our bylaws, and and again, especially if you're, for myself coming from different communities, I think with respect to, I definitely see we've had to make some changes, because I believe that part of it is when you design a bylaw, it looks great on paper, but your litmus test comes down to when you have to do your enforcement. So I think there's definitely some need for improvement, and what comes down to even with parking, there's certain provisions that need to be put in place that allow us to be more efficient when it comes to dealing with complaints or dealing with maybe more of the sort of regular issues that come up. So, when it comes to the community standards, that's such a broad spectrum. I know with respect to, we're looking at, consolidating, what does it mean to taking a snow removal bylaw and putting it into maybe the community standards, or if it's dealing with, say, recreational vehicles or parking, does it stay in the community standards type bylaw, or does it go into the traffic safety bylaw? So I anticipate actually some changes going forward with that. Well, with community standards, and then actually either enhancing if we need to have some additional level of enforcement, or some changes with respect.
So
Councillor, it's not the topic, and I maybe should apologize for bringing it up. I just want to see if it fell into their work for this year, because I think if we start talking about it now, it's a little too soon, because we haven't seen anything on
Yes.
it. But if your question.
my only further question was how can we help, and are there changes to the bylaw that we could make that would help you enforce the parking rules?
I mean, I've seen myself, there's several things that we can add in there as a municipality that definitely would, I guess, bring some clarity sometimes where there's not, it doesn't become, it's not, you know, whether a section might be a bit gray as far as, you know, as far as how we enforce it. I think that's the question I'm looking at, is certain things that have to be very specific of how we deal with it and what that expected outcome of it is.
Okay.
So
We will be seeing that later.
We'll see the community standards bylaw and what's in and what's not. Councillor Monkhouse?
Thank you.
You're not finished?
There's a couple of more questions I'd like to go
Sorry?
on other topics. Animal control, does that extend to coyotes? And are we doing anything to control the coyote population, which I keep reading is encroaching further and further into town, city?
Well, with coyotes, it's an aspect of wildlife that falls under you know, the provincial side of things. So we're talking about Alberta Fish and Wildlife. There's nothing really under our appointment that we can deal with that type of issue. And I guess if we have a concern going forward, it's something that we should be bringing up to you know, our provincial partners, like any. And sometimes, like, even dealing with the sort of have the tools of trade, we don't have a lot of those that we're allowed to actually handle those types of animals.
Yes, I imagine.
Could be.
Okay, thank you.
Did you have any other questions?
There was one other question I just wanted to ask you about. I noticed in the statistics for traffic violations, I've lost it now. There are sections, you counted the number of tickets we've given out for seatbelts and distracted driving. I just wanted to ask, how do you actually, practically, how is those detected?
Trade secret.
Yeah.
Can't tell us.
I mean, there's two avenues to go. I mean, we're either doing you're capturing those on your day-to-day patrols, or you're actually doing focused enforcement. So, you know, at the end of the day, I think with most programs, you know, speed will always be at probably the top of those numbers.
Yes.
Go about, you know, there's you can utilize a traffic safety plan, which we have, you know, in place for Beaumont, which sort of mirrors provincially what other agencies are doing. So, you know, focus might be 1 month is going to be seatbelts or distracted driving. You know, distracted driving actually is something that seems to be more of a concern for our residents here. But I think those are two roles or two sort of avenues that we utilize to actually conduct enforcement.
So, okay, just to clarify that then for me, if you would. So if you're driving on patrol and you observe that somebody isn't wearing a seatbelt or is gabbing on their cell phone, that's an obvious detection. What I was thinking was in terms of if you do have a drive to people not wearing seatbelts, specifically how is that done? Do we set up I have seen in the city of Edmonton, officers using
you know, some of the technologies out there, I've you know, it's not that we're trying to, you know, hide and catch people. I think but I think in some respects, you know, we might have to utilize sometimes those unique. I think for ourselves, I mean, if it comes down to where you might have a spotter or someone sitting in, and then you might have several officers down the way say, hey, that, you know, the individual wasn't wearing a seatbelt or up. So there's different ways of doing it. As I said, it's you. Again, and within the parameters of both the peace officer program, you know, we can't drive unmarked vehicles. So, you know, we always have to rely on, we're always visible in the community. So,
Sergeant, do you have to have a reason to stop a vehicle?
yes.
You have to-
For our officer program, it's not, hey, I think there's a reasonable suspicion that something's wrong. For us, we have to stop a vehicle. You have to have a reason, whether it's a contravention.
And for the RCMP, they don't?
Well, with police, it's different scope. They have a little bit more latitude than what a peace officer do because they're dealing with aspects. So it's when you get into the criminal code, it's different. Yeah, different set of.
Mr. Marco Swain.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation and the report. I know I jumped in earlier, but I'll start by just offering a thanks. Your presence at a lot of the community events around town is definitely known and felt, and really appreciate the fact that you guys are there. Positive ticketing campaign working with RC. It's a really great thing for our community. I know you guys put a lot of effort into it, so thank you for that. To hear about this after hours on-call service, and I'm looking forward to more information on that. So, going through and reading it, I really appreciate the work you're doing. So, I just wanted to acknowledge that. I've got a couple of philosophical questions regarding the law officer, and so maybe this is directed at Chief Cook, or I'm not sure, but response, I guess, that the question or comment I hear from residents a lot is that they're looking for more enforcement as opposed to kind of waiting, and obviously the don't know this and neither do I. So I'm just curious if you could help kind of explain: is there a program that are kind of going out, kind of seeking to look at whether it's sidewalks, snow clearing, that sort of thing, or is it more based on waiting for someone to give them a call and say, hey, this is not working, go out and check on it?
Thank you, Madam Chair. With the position will be focused at enforcement. However, bringing the current team up to full strength, that will allow to start to do other duties which are required of his position, and one of which is component, or at least putting that together. Sergeant Springham just a few moments ago mentioned about science education and such. I anticipate that will be coming in the very near future. And again, Sergeant Springham's been I think 1 month of his term, and since then it's been 2 officers doing the duty of 3. I do anticipate in the near future. What that looks like today, I don't have that answer. However, we look for review in the near future. Tended to talk about actually just not too long, just an hour ago, was actually having the individual on board in no later than June, so that they're ready to be in the schools as early as the fall.
Thank you.
Thank you for that question. Yeah, thank you very much. I don't see any further questions, so thank you for your presentation and for the work that you do. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Councilors.
Again, Chief Cook, you're staying up there, I think, along with now titles, Deputy Chief?
Deputy Fire Chief, yes.
Deputy Fire Chief, Dave Tovey.
Madam Chair, if I may just take a moment to introduce Deputy Chief David Tovey. With my role, I felt it would be appropriate that Deputy Chief Tovey comes over as Administrator of the Fire Service and provide the 2018 annual. Of course, introductions and getting acquainted with council is important. Dave's been with us now 16 months in there, doing a fantastic job for us, and it's
great to see you here.
Well, thanks for having me. Sorry, this is the first time you guys see me up in an official. I'm glad to be here, Madam Chair. I'll just go over the highlights of our annual report. So last year was a fairly busy year. For the last few years, it was one of progressed up to 264. So that was structure fires, alarms calls, which were carbon monoxide, and fire alarm calls, motor vehicle collisions, to some rescues, to the big highlight for us, so 13 structure fires. 11 of those we were able to get on scene, make entry, go inside and put the fire out before it progressed any further. One commercial fire of that, which was really just a big skylight that went out in Rexall Place, or the Rexall drugstore. Well, it wasn't much, but we were able to get on scene on that one and put it out before it progressed any further. Our new crest was unveiled, which when I first started, the members were working on that. Each part of this crest, as much as most people just think it's just a patch, each part of it actually does represent something for the fire service. The members that worked on it really good job. Everywhere we go, and Chief go to conferences, everybody really likes this patch. It's, in my opinion, one of the nicest patches I've seen. So, back in May, we had that fire advisory, which essentially we stopped giving out fire permits. No more, we did some no more burns out in the newly annexed areas and whatnot. So hopefully we have another dry summer, maybe. With all this wet snow, it'll be good. It'll work. Good for us. We bought a new pickup truck, which in the spring will be outfitted. We purchased a wildland skid unit, which is essentially a portable pump where we can have a tank and a hose reel and with a pump on it, so we can utilize that for rural areas, which will be good. The Beaumont, some of you councillors were with us when we did our live fire burns.
Thanks for keeping us alive.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
So
was interesting.
So we did 2 days of live fire training for all of our members. We invited some other departments to join us, which was a really good team building. I'm currently working with another department that's actually bringing that back to see if we can get it here for another day or two again. So if we can get all the councillors to come, it'll be really good, which would be really good for that one. The Fire Service Excellent Review, which was presented to all of you. We're currently looking at the recommendations through that. One of the big ones they had mentioned was to hire shift workers for our volunteer membership. So we're just currently finishing off our recruitment portion. So we had 40 applicants for our positions that we're going to look into. A lot of them were shift workers, which is really good. So that'll help us during the day. That seems to be our problem time, that 7 to 5, 7 to 6 time when most people are working out of town. So if those shift workers are in town, that'll help us out. We did the Making Dreams Come True program. This was our first time doing that. We had Chief Malik, which he was there for the day for us. So multiple things during the day. We had him at the hall. We had a new set of gear for him. We presented him with a helmet. We were able to do a couple mock fire calls with him at school where we rescued Mickey, I believe, on the roof. Really big. So we're looking at hopefully doing that again this year. New thing we started for our fire prevention month, we started doing home inspections. So what we offered, we'd go to residents, just essentially knock on the door, offer a free home inspection of smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detectors, checking batteries, which was really well renowned for the town. A lot of feedback on obviously Beaumont talks and a few other things really noticed that. So with the manufacturer right now looking at buying smoke detectors again to hopefully do that again this upcoming October again. Obviously fire Halloween, big presence there. We were always out handing out candy. I'm not sure how much they handed out this year, but it was piles and piles. So all 3 trucks were out all over the town, making our presence known, handing out candy and whatnot. 4,388 hours total for all of our members for training, which would include our Tuesday night training nights, our certified training courses, which all of our members do take throughout weekends and evenings. Some ice rescue training we've done on that, which included our live fire training as well. We had 77 fire prevention, so inspection activities. So that included some building inspections, occupancy loads and whatnot. We had 430 plus children and adults come to the hall, or we went to schools to do presentations. So it was a fairly busy year for us to go to some of the schools. I believe one school we did 100 plus kids in a couple of days. So it was a big groups. Our firefighters raised for the Christmas elves this year. So in front of Sobeys, we collected that much money, and I believe 3 or 4 truckloads of food that were delivered. So hopefully this year we can increase that amount. That's the plan. So I thank you for listening to my presentation.
Thank you for doing what
Any-
you do. We
Yes.
appreciate it.
Any questions?
Counselor? Yeah, Counselor Hendricks.
Soapbox derby. The fire department had a soapbox built like a fire truck,
Uh-huh.
light on it, siren on it. Kids only got a real food out of it. Is that still around, or what's happened to it?
That must be well before my time, Mr. Mayor.
I remember it. I remember it being in the hallway. I don't know where it went.
Actually, Madam Chair, if I may, Councillor Hendricks, I do remember a conversation about it. I believe it is with one of our past members. Desired, we can inquire about it. Very vaguely, I do remember it, but I heard it was quite the spectacle. If so desired, we can definitely find the location of it.
Yeah, so I'd invite the fire department to bring that unit down to Town and Country Days soapbox derby. Starts at 1 o'clock.
Thanks, Counselor Hendricks.
Duly noted.
Perry's Drive.
Thank you.
Counselor Danlock and then Counselor Stout.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thanks again, guys. Appreciate the presentation. The information is very thorough. I know from the past consultant report on fire services in our community and going forward that ladder 1 is at its 20-year lifespan. It's due to be retired in 2020. And I believe that's, is that a firm date, 20-year lifespan? It depends on the vehicle and use and so on, but can you give us an idea if ladder 1 is definitely going to be replaced in 2020, or we have some latitude there? I know that truck will not be cheap to replace, and we need to make sure we give proper equipment and not cheap out on buying something not great, but those aren't exactly cheap vehicles. So is that a hard number in your mind, Chief, Deputy Chief, that 2020 is a hard number for ladder 1 to be retired?
Sorry, Madam Chair, thank you, Council. Fire services follow the National Fire Protection Association standards for firefighting apparatus. Typically adopt those standards and use them as a guideline for if we didn't have one and our procedures were called into question, they would be used in the courts today as checks and balances. Currently, NFPA identifies a frontline fire apparatus, so a first out apparatus should be replaced at the 20-year mark. We do have the avenue to extend that, yes, for up to another 10 years if the unit is running in a secondary role. So that means another fire truck goes first and it goes out second. Basically, it goes into a reserve role. Today, with any incident we respond to, with the exception of motor vehicle collisions and medicals, that unit responds as a second out unit following the first apparatus. Reason being is everything from pump capacity, so being able to apply more water on a fire, getting more manpower, and of course the raised or elevated master stream and bucket. Looking forward with the apparatus, we're also considering the future of Beaumont. We're looking at how high the buildings are starting to grow, and we're also looking at what those occupancies are within those buildings. At the bottom of the hill, Chateau Canal, okay, so that correctly, we're looking at a 4-story walk-up where we do have adults living there, which pose some concerns with respect to rescue. So as we go forward, we'll weigh all those options and considerations, but with that, again, with the replacement, we do have the option to keep it longer in that secondary role.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Van Hooper?
My next term.
Oh, I'm sorry, Counselor Stout. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the report. That's very thorough and interesting, actually. One thing occurred to me looking through the fire service members' training hours on page 8, I think it is, the report, is that number of hours peaked in 2015 and has actually gone down since then progressively. Is that something I should be concerned about? Is there a reason for that, or is that just natural variation?
If I look back, so prior to me starting, there was a lot of certification courses. Last year we didn't do as many. We just kind of peaked. A lot of guys were at their numbers, so we didn't have to actually train a bunch of people to the certification level. You'll see this year my summer is very busy with certification courses because some people left and some people didn't get into those numbers. So what we want is to build people up. We don't want to give them all the courses at once. We want to give them that certification firefighting course, let them be a firefighter for a couple of years, then get a pump course, and then learn how to be a good pump operator. And then the following year, give them a ladder course to get them So that, and versus giving them all at that one-shot deal, which I think was happening prior to me getting here. They were getting everything at once, so they weren't really becoming very good at one thing. They were just kind of getting a whole whack of course at once and not being very good at
So there's
everything.
a change in philosophy of progression.
Yeah, progression now. We've done a progression now, yeah.
And I imagine that staff turnover also has an
A
effect.
little bit of staff turnover, yeah. So,
Okay, thank you.
so there should be, right now, I have 4 members that are going to do their NFPA 1001, so their firefighter courses this year, with probably some of the new members that we're going to hire, so maybe 8 we're going to actually put through the levels of that 1001 level. We have some pump courses this year and aerial courses, and a wildland course, which hasn't been offered this year. So
So would you anticipate that the 2019
Should be
number will be high?
higher, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Van de Graaff.
Yeah, just a couple of questions. First one on the response statistics. Maybe just help us understand what changed with the Alberta Health Services dispatch system, and just jumping from 47 calls to 106.
Yep.
And what does that mean now to a call in Beaumont versus at 106 versus what a call was like when there was only 47?
Sure.
Yeah.
So again, prior to me getting here, it was not a computer-based system. So when Parkland took over and HS turned into a digital system, it essentially, a paper system was turned into an electronic system, and a lot of those calls didn't transfer properly. So I worked with AHS, and we actually got into what we were supposed to be going to, what wasn't going to happen. So in July of last year is when actually everything took effect. So right now we automatically respond to echo and delta calls. So in layman's terms, an echo call is somebody really sick. A delta is somebody that we can wait a little bit, but they're still pretty sick. So we automatically respond to those calls. As soon as the AHS gets that call, we back up AHS. And we're on a time-weighted call for Charlie calls, and a Charlie call is somebody that's not really sick, but potentially, if nothing really goes, if we don't help them out, they're going to progress into a sicker person. So right now, if no ambulance is in within 20 minutes of Beaumont, we get called out for those ones. So as per the response, there's probably nothing changes for that. We still do the same levels of service for those medical calls.
So what's your sphere of influence? How far from Beaumont?
We stay in the city limits.
Stays-
Yeah, we don't
okay.
go any further. That's essentially all we.
Except if you were going to haul someone in.
No, we don't. We don't transport.
Okay.
So we can drive the AHS ambulance if they request us.
Okay.
So there is criteria for us to drive one of their medics, but we don't transport. So if we go on scene and AHS isn't there yet, we just do within our scope. So basically do a basic patient assessment and just sit there with the patient until AHS gets over, and then they take over. So
That's good to know. Thank you. And the second one?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that
Yeah.
was one of my questions as well. Thank you for asking it. But you're saying that essentially the response is the same. It's the way you're capturing the data.
yes. Yeah.
Go ahead, Councillor Duncan.
And then I think you missed out on fire prevention and education. 2 evenings you had
Oh,
staff
yes.
come and visit
Yes.
us at the Beavers. So
Oh, yes.
we had a whole bunch of people talking about fire alarms and parents.
Oh,
concerned,
perfect.
And they left their mark there. So
Yeah, that's
there was
good.
15 each night for your numbers there.
Oh, perfect.
Thank you for coming to that.
Thank you.
Good catch. Councillor Monkhouse-Wayne.
Yeah, I just want to build off that a bit, and similar to what my comments to Sergeant Springham before, just a real thank you for the work that you guys do. And I know obviously the paid staff as well as the volunteers, they really like working, and for you guys, obviously the core focus is the fire protection and the health side of things, but a lot of the work you do around the community is very visible, and I know community members, they feel that you're certainly a part of the community, and you guys are at every single event, and that really helps with the educational piece, which obviously helps minimize the call-outs that you need to do down the road. So I don't have any questions on this. I just wanted to acknowledge that you guys
Thank you.
are very well received in the community. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Councillor Danlock and then Councillor Hendricks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick comment on this past year's budget, 2019, or this current year's budget. Council had provided funding for replacing the breathing apparatus, which I believe is 20 years old. is my understanding. So it's not really a service issue, but if you don't have good equipment and tools, you can't provide good service. So how is it coming along with the replacement of the equipment this year's budget? Has that been ordered now? Is it in your hands now, or how soon will you be getting the equipment you guys need?
Yeah, so the RFP was granted end of February, middle of February. We anticipate the SCBA's being here end of March. March 26th is the delivery date.
Good,
So they should be here.
good. Glad to hear that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, and under budget, actually. So
Under budget.
So we had
That's
three,
fine,
we
under
had,
budget.
we had three proposals and, so we had
In
one.
the reserve fund for the new ladder truck, I guess.
Slide it over
Probably
there.
buy a tire or two. maybe.
Now that's another story.
Well,
Okay.
what type of tire? Hold on.
Yeah, it'd be a good tire, yeah.
Councillor Hendricks.
Just on your recruiting drive, got one active currently.
Yeah, we have it. We just finished. It closed on Friday. So
How do we do?
we had 40 applicants and wide range of fully qualified with all their courses to people that have no qualifications, which was good. That's what we wanted. So they will be doing a physical test on Saturday, a bunch of them. So it's a new thing for the Beaumont Fire Service to do and not really, I wouldn't say a physical, it's more of a job-related skill test, just to give everybody an idea of what we go through on a daily basis, potentially. And then from there, there'll be some interviews. And then we'll probably anticipate end of March to get everybody started, to go through their, probably about a 9 to 12 week recruitment program.
Great.
Just following up on that, because that was another one of my questions. Of those recruits, what kind of diversity are we seeing?
All over, 3 females, which was good.
3?
3, which was good.
Not as high as I'd like to see it yet.
Yeah.
It's coming. That's
It's
good.
coming yet, and again, all 3 were, if I could remember, one was not trained, the 2 others are fully trained, so they're ready to go.
What about other cultures, people from outside of Canada?
To be honest, all I did was look at resumes, so I did, or applications,
yet.
so it was by names, it was tough to go by that, but
Glad to see that that's
So-
starting to change.
yes,
And we do have one female on our,
we have 1, yes.
at least in pictures.
Yeah, so.
Maybe could be others. Thank you for that. Any other questions? Oh, Chief? Oh, Mr. Danler?
Thank you, Madam Chair. As my colleague, Councillor Moncalves-Swain, mentioned, this last June's live fire training exercise, Mayor Stewart was there, and myself and Councillor Moncalves-Swain and Councillor Studd was there in the background, being locked in a sea can with 12 fully equipped firefighters, hoses, and starting a fire was quite the experience. So I'd love to do it again and watch what you guys do, seeing it live up close and personal. It's amazing. Service you guys provide, and that's why we need to give you guys good equipment to do what you guys do. So thank you very much.
Thank you for that. Chief Cook, you had...
Actually, if I may just, I'd like to just elaborate just for a moment on Alberta Health Services and just one of the other challenges, I'll use the word challenge or stress that the Beaumont Fire Service actually works through with respect to medical calls. I believe everyone at the table knows that Alberta Health Services is, we do have a contract with them. They have one ambulance in our station, 24/7, 365. However, with the system they implemented, they do take that ambulance from time to time and move it to a more central location if they find themselves, for example, short of ambulances on the south side of the city. They may take the one out of Beaumont, move it towards Ellerslie or another station, leaving a void in Beaumont, and that's where we come in. So if there is, as DC Toby mentioned, a little bit longer of a wait, we're going to be called to go and address that individual a little bit more often than not. Another comment with respect to Alberta Health Services as well is when the ambulance transports out of Beaumont and they go there. When they transport out of Beaumont, and if they take someone to the Grey Nuns, for example, we then again have that void, but they do relocate another ambulance from City of Leduc Fire, for example, here to Beaumont. So they're always moving pieces around that table, but again, it does leave voids, and at times we do get caught up in that void, filling in for HS when they're not available, or we're closer.
It's good to know. I appreciate you sharing that with us. Thank you. No other questions? Then thank you very much. And we appreciate all that you do.
Thank you.
It's been said many times tonight. Thanks to you. Our next presentation, keep going here, from the Master Plan, Recreation and Parks and Facilities Master Plan, what we heard.
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of Council. This evening I have Justin Rousseau with me tonight. Justin and his team at Expedition Management Consulting is working on our Recreation Facilities and Parks Master Plan. Currently we're in phase 3 of the plan right now, and Justin is here to provide us an update of what we heard. Previously, Justin's been here with us on August 30th and again on November 20th to provide an update. So we'll let Justin
Take it away,
give us an
Mr.
update.
Russo. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are we loading up PowerPoint? Thank you, Madam Chair and Council. Pleased to be here with you this evening, and just want to cover a couple things over the next 15 minutes or so. The first is to present the highlights of the community engagement process of the master plan, and then of course an opportunity for some questions about any of the material that we see here. So just a reminder, the project itself will develop a Recreation Parks Facilities Master Plan for the next 10 years. So to 2029, it will be your roadmap for recreation, parks, and culture moving forward. As mentioned, we're now in phase 3, but we're actually reporting on phase 2 right now, the community engagement phase. But we're well into phase 3, and the consultant team's working in behind the scenes, working with your staff in developing the preliminary priorities report. But today we're going to be talking about engagement. So this presentation is a brief summary of the findings of the engagement activities that happened before Christmas over a couple-month period. This engagement process is a very important part of the overall process, and it's a very important input, but it's not the only input. We take all of the community engagement feedback that we receive. We marry that up with trends in the industry, with facility usage statistics, and so we look at the whole package and then come up with some recommendations for you to consider in the draft report. But today we are going to be talking about what folks, the residents and stakeholders had to say. You saw this slide last time when we met, and we talked about what level of consultation we were doing through this process, and we showed this slide to the stakeholders and to the public during the process, during all the meetings. And it was at the consult stage. So what we want to do is make sure that we hear what people have to say, record their information, and then report back to them and show how their information was used in decision making. So if you look over way on the left, it's inform, where it would just be, this is what we're doing, and way over on the right, whereas the individuals at the table would have full power to execute, we were at the consult stage. So we asked 3 main questions, and we got into some greater detail within these, but the 3 main questions were what new or improved indoor facilities are needed, what new or improved outdoor facilities are needed, and what new or improved programs, activities, and events are needed. And so we did that in a whole different, through a bunch of different mediums. The first being the public survey, which we collected and interviewed 400 individuals, residents of Beaumont. I was just reviewing the report again. They made 2,900 calls to get to that 400 interviews. So it was a lot of work on behalf of Bannister and our team and our team. So it was 400 interviews on the public phone survey. We'll talk about the results of that survey tonight. The online public survey, 269 people responded to that. And there was a late push the last week or so. I think after we did sort of the update here, there was a really good push at the end. The online stakeholder survey, 22 responded to that. The counselor survey, all counselors responded to the interview. The staff input workshop, we had 18 individuals part of that. And then I think the real success of all this is the 406 people that we got to talk to one-on-one through the process. That was really a highlight for us. So I'm not expecting you to read this in any great detail. There's a lot on here, but this question, we're just going to take some of the main highlights of the phone survey, talk about them, and then do the same for each medium that we used. So we talked about, we asked the question about satisfaction, and overall there's pretty good satisfaction with recreation, parks, and culture. But this slide really talks about where there's some need or some dissatisfaction. Indoor recreation facilities are circled there, were identified as sort of some level of dissatisfaction there. Cultural opportunities, and then spontaneous recreation opportunities. So those are things where people can go out and drop in. They don't have to sign up for anything. They can go with their family or their loved ones or whoever and enjoy the activities that in a non-structured sort of way. That we saw that as a need in just about everyone we talked to in each different medium. We also asked what the common barriers to participation were. Too busy and not enough time for the phone survey was number one by a pretty good margin. Lack of facilities and overcrowded facilities also were in there, as well as programs not offered. And then the rest of the reasons why people might not participate kind of round out the rest there. In terms of indoor facility needs, a field house was number one that came forward through the phone survey. More ice sheets came in as number two. Performing Arts Center after that. More swimming pool and aquatic amenities. So you might be asking, well, we have a swimming pool. Why is swimming pool in there? Well, we heard this throughout all as well. More amenities, more leisure amenities, like you would see in some other communities, play features, that sort of thing. A little more fun in the pool, I guess, is what people were saying for the most part. And so I'm kind of extrapolating into this, but that's what we heard out there in the community when we were talking to people. A walking and running track, and then we get into a movie theater. So I don't know what you can do about that. You want to build a movie theater. And gymnasium also in there. So if you look at this and you consider that you're adding some of these amenities already in the very near future, in that a field house and arena, one arena ice sheet is being added, that you're going to be solving at least some of that need for sure. And then you get into performing arts and then leisure amenities in the pool, or expansion of the pool. Walking and running track will be definitely covered, of course, in your upcoming renovation. In terms of outdoor facility needs, the top ones were outdoor rinks. And I think what people were saying here was boarded rinks. I think that's what we heard out there mostly. And then trails and walking paths. That surprised us. Usually trails is like number one, right? So outdoor rinks this time was number one. Trails, sport fields, amphitheater came up quite often from various different groups. Baseball diamonds, dog park as well, splash park and expansion of the spray parks. So it goes down the list into some others, but those were the top ones. We also asked about programming, because we want to not only know about facilities, but also what goes into those facilities, and camp programs for children. And given the demographics of Beaumont, it's no surprise that was top of mind for people. Fitness programs and culture programs as well. Instructional and learn to programs, children and youth programming, arts and crafts also came in there. So then that's just a real quick snapshot of the phone survey. There's a ton of data supporting all this, but we're just trying to get to the point here tonight. We'll move on to the online survey. The indoor and outdoor facility needs and programming needs were quite similar between the online and the phone survey, but they were in different orders. So the top 5 indoor facility needs identified in the online survey were ice arenas number 1, performing arts number 2, field houses, aquatics facilities, and gymnasiums. And then outdoor was trails number 1, natural areas, which didn't make the top in the phone, but we heard a lot about that in the in-person as well. Sport fields, outdoor rinks, and outdoor pools. And then in terms of satisfaction levels, they were a bit lower on the online, as well as the barriers to participation were a bit different as well. Often the online, you get people that are very engaged already and very motivated to participate in the survey. So they might have different barriers than those that were sort of cold called. And then satisfaction levels too, they might be really involved in certain activities, organized groups and whatever, so their satisfaction was a bit lower. Their barriers weren't too busy, it was more there isn't enough facilities. So that was a key difference between the online and the phone. In terms of the counselor interviews we did, we asked about indoor facilities. Performing arts came in number 1 with the group. Library number 2, ice surface and field house. And then for outdoors, ball diamonds, football field, multipurpose turf, spray park, and amphitheater, and trails rounding that out. So a bit different, so interesting results there. Just going to shift gears here to the in-person engagement results that we did. So this is a list of all of the activities that we did out in the community, the in-person activities. The seniors input session, went to the high school, did pop-ups in the facilities, did a youth input session, and the highlight probably was the master plan party event where we got to speak with a lot of families that maybe aren't involved in as many structured activities. And there was 406 people that were engaged as part of that. So we'll just talk a little bit about the results from that. In terms of the top indoor facilities that came out of that, upgrades to existing aquatic center was number 1 by a pretty good margin. Now the master plan party did happen at the pool, but definitely we spoke with a lot of young families there, and that was where their head was at. Facilities for young children and youth, more ice surfaces, climbing facilities, and performing arts centers. So again, you're hitting some of those with your innovation. The top 5 outdoor, expanded and connected trails, number 1. So there's trails again. The dog park, we got dog park coming out to many of the events, I think probably all of them. Improvements to the skate park, park amenities, and basketball courts. Outdoor basketball courts are a thing. In every community we find that it doesn't register on the phone survey because mom and dad are answering the phone. Even like out at some of the groups, when we go talk to the youth, that they want outdoor basketball, right? And it's a pretty inexpensive thing to do to keep youth happy. The top 3 programming needs, yoga programs came in number 1, nature-based programs again, and then youth programming. So this slide talks about the organized stakeholder group meetings that we had. So we did a series of meetings where all groups were invited, 3 of those, but we also did board presentations and spoke specifically with certain boards, anyone who really wanted to. But also in the survey, we did a pretty extensive survey with them. And the real story is the growth in youth sports in the recent years. So from 15 to 17, soccer grew 30% from 900 participants to almost 1,200. Over that same time period, hockey grew by 25, this is minor hockey, grew by 25%, from 408 participants to 611. And baseball over that same time period, this is minor baseball, grew 56%, from 280 participants to 437 participants. So, we did hear about baseball, we did hear about ice sheets, we did hear about soccer fields, and this is why. There's some pressure being felt, I'm sure you're aware of that, but the numbers sure show that pressure that's being felt by these groups. Also, we heard from cultural groups that there's a need for cultural facilities. And we didn't just hear that from cultural groups, we even heard it from some of the sport groups that came out, that they would like to see some more well-rounded facilities. And then I mean, you pretty much guess each group that we talked to wanted more of what they were doing, right? So ice surfaces, ball diamonds, indoor training space was actually, that's kind of spread across multiple groups, which is going to be taken care of to some degree with the field house, at least the current need, that is. Pickleball courts, pickleball was out at least twice, maybe 3 times. Expanded library, and then park amenities. And then stakeholders would like to see facilities designed to grow, built to last, future-proof. So this whole idea, we talked a lot about that. Like, are we building just for today? Are we building cheaper and hoping to get away, patch things through? Or are we building for things to last? And they really were pushing that point. The last point was involvement. And I will say that the groups feel that the involvement with the town and their involvement in decision making is getting better, but they're still not satisfied. They'd like to see more engagement, more involvement in decision making as on an ongoing basis, and they'd like to see it a little bit more codified in what you're doing, so it happens from council to council and from administration to administration over the long term. So in conclusion, we were really happy with the information that we got, how forthright the residents were with us and the groups. We had some very, very good feedback from multiple different angles. And now we're kind of triangulating all that and finding the themes and when we build out the draft plan. That information will be put together in a preliminary options report and reviewed with your administration. A draft plan will be developed in May. For council review, this is the schedule right now, is late May. For public review in June, and then the final master plan after that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
A lot of work has been done. Appreciate that. Just before I open the floor, I don't think it was mentioned, but in terms of your samples, were they representative of the town in any way? Were you able to get the demographics to kind of match, or do you have any data on that?
Yes, well, the phone survey, they went to great pains to make sure that there was relatively even distribution of ages.
Okay.
Male and females 50-50. Okay. And we got the full breakdown, but in multiple cultures as well.
You felt pretty good about you got a good rounded sample there.
Yeah.
In both the online as well? Is the online?
The online is anonymous.
Yeah, so you don't know.
We didn't get into all the demographic information in the online. It was more of a quick and dirty online survey to try and get more engagement.
Okay, thank you for that. So, councillors, you ready? Councillor Hendricks.
Just a question on facilities. I don't see a bowling alley. We used to get that as a sort of a regular piece. Falling off the charts. So
I think so.
Yeah.
I don't remember any conversations either about it.
Okay. Yeah, at one point it was a hot topic. It seems to have fallen by the wayside. So. Okay, great. Yeah. Thanks.
Councillor Moncor-Swain and then Councillor Danny Cook.
Yeah, thank you for the work on this. I wonder if you could just paint me a picture of what we're going to see in May. Are you going to be providing, so we're getting a bunch of summaries and it's all nice. It's all nice high level information, but at some point they're obviously going to hit the road. So is your summary, the draft plan, going to be kind of prioritize things, and then it's up to us to kind of figure that order out based on where we're going, or just paint me a picture of what I'm going to see in May?
We will be providing our recommended priority listings or priorities for all facilities, programs, and any action items. And that'll be justified, backed up by multiple inputs, including community stakeholder input. And then I guess that's where you guys come in terms of making the decisions on where you want to put things and whether you want to move some things around or not.
Yeah, I guess the genesis of my question is I'm trying to, it's great to ask people, but at the end of the day, money comes into it. And, what might rank when you're filling out a survey versus, impact to the budget, right? So will you have that kind of lens on, or is that where we take over and we look for input from our administration and say, okay, this ranked really high, but it's going to cost X. Maybe we can, get better production here if we focus on these 3 or 4 things. So just trying to get a sense is when does that budget piece come into the discussion?
Well, we definitely want to provide you as many tools as we can when you're moving through this decision-making process. So if there are opportunities to get better bang for your buck, we will analyze those and bring those forward. The costs of those will be presented as well. So we will be providing prioritization, and it might not line up with the number 1 from the phone survey. Number 2, we'll be taking into account, facility usage. People are saying that they want this, but then are they using it? And what's the condition of your existing facilities in relation to what the needs are? What's the condition of or the supply of other facilities in relation to the ones that are sort of raising high on the priority list? That all goes into the mix.
Just can I follow up on that? Because usually there's a steering committee which is made up of the administration and the consultants, and they kind of vet the recommendations before it comes. Is that happening here, or are you essentially this council's the steering committee? I just would like to know at what point you get the information that Councillor Moncrief-Swain is mentioning in terms of budget and restrictions and things like that. Do you get it before you bring those recommendations to us, or is that after?
Should I take that one?
Yeah, I think the path that we're on, the next steps would be presenting to council the recommendation, and then it would be around this table to make that decision.
Mr. Schwartz, is that your expectation?
Carries.
Oh. Somebody behind me. Oh.
I believe that we'll be taking these results back to the community. The community kind of how we'll align them and kind of verify the results as well. Not to track them, my understanding is that we're doing that, and that gives us that time back. We did that with a fund consultation before it comes back and
The administration will have time to make it known. So I think it's rather difficult if we get the recommendations and we don't know if we can afford it.
So, maybe that was a better way to ask the question. Thank you, Cam. And so we'd hope that part of the discussion that we include our 5-year plan and all that sort of stuff. And I know it's part of it. Just trying to get a sense of when that comes into it. We've obviously got a large facility that needs to be paying off here, and so I just want to make sure when that part of the process is going to be included. And so if you don't have an answer, you don't need to get back to us now, but going forward, you could.
Well, as Mr. Hiltz was explaining, the next step will bring back those options. We can consult more to determine whether we want to consult more with the public, and then administration can take it back and come back with a financial plan and say, yes, priority number 1 is $50 million, not going to be able to afford it for 10 years. We recommend priority number 4 because this is the one we can afford, and then have that debate with council.
One thing I would add to that is bringing it back to the community without saying that it does depend on availability of funds can set us up
absolutely, and I'll
for
leave that
failure
up to
if
Justin's
they think it's just
expertise.
whatever you want. We know I believe our citizens know that isn't just anything goes, but at the same time, I think we have to be careful we don't raise expectations to the point of no return. So.
Madam Chair, I think I could put just a finer point on the process here. So the very next thing we're doing is a preliminary options report that we're going to review with the internal steering committee that you're speaking of with administration. At that point, we're bringing forward the initial ideas. This is where we think everything's going to fall. Then we go back and take the input from administration, analyze it, and come up with a priority list. Then and also a draft plan, bring that to council before it goes to public, review it with you, then we go to the public with the suggested priorities. And then the final plans after that.
May is still your timeline for the draft.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
You can appreciate the questioning where it's coming from. Obviously, from a community perspective, they're wanting us to dive into this sort of thing as well. We've just been hold off, let's do this properly. And so I just want to make sure that when it does come in May, we're just trying to get a lineup of what's actually coming to us in May. So you did paint the picture I was looking for, so thank you.
Appreciate that. Thank you. I think it was Councillor Van Newkirk.
Sure, yeah, comment and then a
Councillor
couple questions. So, I think I said it before, but I think the reach of this study has been really great. And the numbers and links that you guys have went to go into the community and not just hang out and wait for the community to come to you, I think that's commendable. So thank you for that. There's one word I didn't see in that whole presentation. It was campground. What did you hear about that?
I would have to dig a little deeper into the data, but it's not jumping out as like a, it didn't come out as a major priority.
Yeah, I noticed that.
Yeah. So we'd have to, I'm sure we could find it in there.
Yeah.
But
If it's
it
not
wasn't.
top of mind, then it was probably pretty low. So, yeah. Second, in the phone surveys, there were 4 opportunities or communication or service gaps, I guess.
Yeah.
And just wondering if those will be addressed or highlighted as part of the rec master plan.
Yes.
It was the lower income. It was the.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah. Back on that slide there. It was recreation opportunities
Seniors,
for lower
newcomers,
income,
and special
for
needs.
seniors, new Canadians, and residents of special needs. So I think, awareness around that is probably something that it will be important. I think, and I'm just wondering if the master plan will highlight some of that.
Yeah. To answer your question, yes. And there was a fair amount of dissatisfaction with diversity of programming and programming for people with disabilities and new Canadians. So there will be a section talking about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's just as important as, the 3 that are circled in red on that one, right? Just to make sure that the efforts that are being put forward for those are recognized and communicated well, and where there are service gaps that, we're given the opportunity to identify those and be able to choose or not choose, I guess, to do something about it. So, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Just on that as well, what I was going to say is the don't know is really significant on those.
Yes.
And it's, it didn't raise them up to the top ones to pay attention to, but at the same time, when you look at, the overall feeling I get there is that that's where the gaps.
Don't know might be a communication gap.
Exactly. So what does that mean? And I agree with you. Thank you for raising that. So it needs further investigation.
Yeah, and that's all I had, so thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Danma.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Great report, great update for us. I think it can be said quite well that we have done a very good job through your service to engage the public on this matter through all different ways. I know, learning from the survey results, I think it's fair to say, just for the record and people listening at home perhaps, that the sampling of 400 people on phone interviews and 425 on online surveys, that's about 2% of our 18,500 population. Is that still a reasonable number? I believe it is from talking to you before, but just for today's purposes, that that sampling of people does give you enough to extrapolate into your recommendations, and for our council to take this being a reasonably good sampling of the town. It's only 2%, but it's probably a pretty good survey result given your experience, is my understanding.
Yes. Yes, and that was, it's a random sample, statistically valid survey, the phone survey. So it's a random sample where the online wasn't a random sample. Anyone can go on there and respond. And even the in-person people that come out, it's not necessarily a random sample, but the phone one was. And what we also want to make sure we do is like do that triangulation where we're looking at input from the phone, we're looking at input from the online and the in-person, and looking where those themes are. And there was quite a bit to see in terms of the correlation between all inputs. So I think we're going to have it shouldn't be too onerous of a task to justify various positions based on what we're hearing there from multiple sources.
Okay. So a quick thing, just based on your experience then, the random online survey, anybody could go on and do it. 425 respondents, is that a good number?
Yes, that's
a good number, considering anybody in town could have done that survey.
That's right, yeah.
Okay, good, thank you. I was going to on the credibility of the numbers.
When you mentioned the outdoor rinks, a question that occurred to me was, and it was something I saw in Halifax when I was out there for one of the conferences that we had, the FCM, roller skating. Did anyone mention roller skating on campgrounds? I'm wondering why we don't hear, but well, it's probably because it's dated and not too many people, there's bowling, are doing it, but I'm wondering if the outdoor rinks, if any other communities are using them for skating. I know in Halifax they've done that in their outdoor, they have a very wide area that they run on, that they skate on,
Yeah.
they ice skate on in the winter, and I think roller skating in the
Also
summer.
roller hockey too, actually.
Yeah, and I just wonder, some of us can't skate on ice, but some can skate on wheels.
We
Just
didn't
wonder
hear
that.
too much about roller skating, and like roller derby is a bit on trend. I mean, maybe it's a bit past it now, but for a while there,
back. Eventually
roller
they'll come
derby was
back.
huge. Yeah, we had one consultation. We had 50 rollerblade ladies come to the consultation meeting in full gear and paint and everything.
It's scary.
No, that wasn't you, but it was did happen to our firm at one point in time. It was quite interesting, but not here.
Just something to put out there in case
Yeah.
anyone's thinking about it, besides me. Okay, thank you for that. Any other questions? Or Councillor Stout?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Excuse me. Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to ask you quickly with the question about the random phone survey and the slightly non-random, or definitely non-random nature of the online responses, because they're self-selecting, of course, they can't be random. There was, and you alluded to a difference in the outcomes. In particular, I think it was what were the barriers to preventing people from participating in recreational activities. The phone survey produces a noticeably different result from the online survey, whereas in many other areas they were at least compatible.
Yeah.
What do you attribute that to?
Those that went online to do the survey were more engaged in recreational activities on a day-to-day basis. That's what I would say, and that their barrier isn't not more time, it's not more ice, not more fields. They want more.
It's that
yes.
My facility isn't the thing I want to do isn't catered to as
Right.
much or as well
Right.
as I'd like.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
So, and that speaks to the non-random nature of the survey, whereas somebody who doesn't have a particular opinion doesn't perceive that there's a lack of a suitable facility,
Right.
At least not as much.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stout. Councillor Mokoff-Swain?
Yeah, just to pull on it, there seem to be a lot of questions about the data and what that means. I think one of the most important points in this slide, you glossed over it pretty quickly here, was that consultation is part of the process, but it's not the whole process. And you can only do so much. And to Councillor Van Nieuwkerk's point, you've dived in everywhere you can. I don't think I could say that they didn't have an opportunity to provide. And so I think our job is to certainly take this information, but also parlay it with a lot of feedback that we're going to get directly from staff as well. So consultation is certainly an important part, but I appreciate that you acknowledge that we're not going to go out and make a decision based on what was ranked number one on the phone survey or the other survey. So I just wanted to acknowledge that before we, just wanted to touch on that.
Thank you. And further? No? Okay. Thank you very much for your presentation and work you've done on this, and we look forward to seeing what comes back next time.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm going to call for a 5-minute break at this point, just we've been at it for an hour and a half or so.
Having been disjointed and having myself trying to go back and forth and represent groups without them being present. So I'm glad the BSA was able to. Based on some of the previous discussions that we have had regarding the council, it's come down to the roles of the Beaumont Society of the Arts and the Beaumont Arts Council, operational funding and report mechanisms, steps in the establishment of the arts policy, terms of reference, and operational plans. So one of the the report does highlight considerations regarding the arts, the establishment of the arts policy, some of the considerations for committee members to be making. One of the fundamental discussion points that I think that we really need clarity on, direction for administration and direction for the arts, is at the end of the day, who is going to be ultimately responsible for arts programming in the community? Is it going to be the Beaumont Society of the Arts or the Beaumont Arts Council, or is it going to be the City of Beaumont? And I think that's going to be something that's going to drive us forward to bring clarity to something that will basically set the policy. Does the policy be set as basically a town or city-driven program or service, or is it going to be something that we support in their pursuit of doing this? And so I think from the Beaumont Society of the Arts perspective, that's something that clarity is something that we do need, and we do need to, so that as we move forward with the policy. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Tully now, who's going to talk a little bit about the history, kind of take us through the steps of how we got to this point, and also we'll open up for be able to hopefully address tonight. And if we do need some additional time, we'll be happy to do that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tully.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, Your Worship, others present. I've been asked by the Beaumont Society for the Arts to be here and speak with you tonight. My title at the moment is past president. And the reason I'm sitting in this chair at the moment is that I've been here since day one of the development of this policy. And so I was kind of put back in the hot seat to keep it going here, I guess. I just would like to mention that we have our president, current president, Chantal Yardley, is in the audience, and vice president, Jeremy Cornell. And if there are questions that you may have that I can't answer, I hope that I would be able to direct some of those questions to them because they have experience in areas that I don't. So I'm pleased to be here this evening to move the arts policy along toward approval. Now, by the arts policy, I mean, of course, the document you have in front of you titled The Development and Practice of Artistic and Cultural Expression Policy in Beaumont. Now, to set the stage for my remarks, please note that we have elected not to bring additional presentation materials to the table tonight. We thought that would just kind of complicate things more. We have enough paper and enough information there. So the two documents that you have, and Mr. Hiltz was kind enough to share those with me as well, of course, and so that we're all coming at this from the same set of documents. Now, notwithstanding the fact of the documents that you have in front of you, I will make some verbal remarks to give a bit of background as to where we collectively, by that I mean the Beaumont Society for the Arts and our membership and City Council, where we're at with the development of the arts policy, and then move on to the challenges that face us currently, and that we hope we can get past to get the policy approved. My remarks are designed to get us to the same page so that we can move forward from a common understanding of what we are trying to accomplish. Please forgive me if some of my next comments may sound rather academic. They're not meant to be condescending or lecturing at all, but simply to, as I say, set the stage and get us all onto, or at least from the perspective that I have seen from the beginning of this process. I believe it is the best way to come to a common understanding. And of course, we have time to discuss any points afterwards, I would hope. So let me go way back with what we view as the purpose of policy. And this, what I'm about to say, was written in an earlier draft of the policy. It is not in the current draft that you have in front of it, but I thought it was worth reviewing. Policy is developed by any municipality, by Beaumont, to serve three purposes. One, to educate and Beaumont residents concerning challenges and opportunities surrounding specific elements of the community and its development. Secondly, to establish organizing principles upon which sound, value-based decisions can be made by council and residents alike. And thirdly, to provide a framework for governance and management models and to guide behaviors during the implementation of the intent of the policy by those governance and management models, whichever ones are chosen. Now, here's how I view policy, and I hope that this will get us onto the same page in terms of the purpose of policy. Good policy will always include what I call the 6 W's. Okay, so a policy, any policy should define who gets what, when, and where. Now there's 4 W's, and that is in the political and social sphere. Policy development, exactly where we are today with the arts policy, should include all the research. Council at the time referred the question to administration, and I must applaud administration. They did a lot of legwork and work for us on that, and it took some time. It took almost a year for them to go through the books and
with numbers that gave some definition. A huge pot that everyone was kind of lumped into. In 2016, so about 2.5 years ago, administration returned with a qualified report that's the 2/3, 1/3 ratio that is talked about in some of the policy statements in the document before you. That arts and culture initiatives in Beaumont were underfunded by approximately $200,000 relative to the sport and recreation side of things, and that included taking into account what was already being spent and identifiable in terms of the funding that had been allowed at that time to the Beaumont Society for the Arts. So that gave us some idea of I guess, the bad analogy, the ballpark, the park that we were playing in, and how.
Bad analogy.
Bad analogy. Bad analogy or mixed metaphor, both of them. I'll try to avoid it. So that was the report that we got, and of course that gave us then some idea of the lay of the land, shall we say. So this is the very basic background to answer the question, why? Why a policy? So we're up to 5 W's, and the why was because there still is a need for coordinated artistic and cultural programming in Beaumont, and that is our belief. It's kept us going this 4.5 years with this policy to try some confirmation to where we are and where we're. Now we've looked at 5 of the 6 W's, and I shall return to the 6th because it more directly affects, I think, where we are this evening. With the 5 of those answered, the BSA's offer, the Beaumont Society for the Arts' offer, to prepare a draft policy, which was done and which was returned to council for examination a number of times. Mentioned, and we have examined it in depth, and most recently on the 18th of December 2018. Now, if I may pause here for just a moment, with the acceptance of that offer on to do the work of researching and writing and drafting and preparing council, I went back through my records, and nowhere was it stated that, at least not in writing, that we inferred from that acceptance for us to do that for the city, that the model of BS length outside private sector or volunteer organization using us to do that, that would continue. So we had inferred that what I would call a community development model, where it was not or administration, it was the interest group. So perhaps that was a false assumption at the time, but that's what we have been operating. Model that council at the time, at least, wanted us to follow in the future. And most recently, 18th of December 2018, the policy came again, council table. At the December 18th meeting, administration was directed to return to information as noted in the request for decision document before you, and there are 3 healths summarized for you. Now, if I may parallel track, one of the things that that is in those 3 before you is that council directed administration, who asked with some comments on in terms of strategic planning, operational planning, of this working. So let me speak for just a few moments about where we came from and what was in our minds as we went through the hierarchy of planning. So in terms of the development of this policy, it really includes, to some degree, strategic directions for a strategic plan. Now, there was in an earlier version of the policy that came to this table, there was a paragraph, well, several paragraphs that talked about strategic directions, where the policy, as it was written, would take us, which directions we were going to go to accomplish the 5 W's or the 6 W's. So the strategic plan we view as a mid to long-term horizon, 3 to 5 years or beyond. Generally speaking, out in the world, that's what strategic plans do. They lay those strategic directions. So those strategic directions have been included in an earlier draft. Now the policy following those strategic directions will then set the foundation and conceptualizes the framework for a detailed strategic plan. But we can't bring that forward to you yet until we go through the other plans. But we are aware that it needs to be done. It's one of the first things that will need to be done once the policy is approved. Now the next level in the hierarchy of planning is an implementation plan. The policy is approved. How are we going to do it? Now, how is a more immediate horizon? Right now, policy approved, how do we implement? Now note that I used deliberately the word how, and this is the 6th W, if you will, mentioned earlier. Now it starts with H, the W's at the end, but for the sake of simplicity, I try to count it as a W. So within the policy draft that you have in front of you, we have 6 separate and unique policy statements in the document. And the next naturally progressive question is, how is this going to work? Now this is an essential part of good policy, any policy, not just the arts policy, any policy. How is this going to work when it's out in the real world and when the rubber hits the road? You were collectively very astute to ask the question when you did on December 18th, though you may not have been aware that you were right on track with the theoretical development of the policy. But we're in the right place at the right time is what I'm trying to say. So if we can, having answered the 6 W's and looked at that in an academic or a theoretical framework, why we're developing the policy, what it does, and we're now on to the how's it going to work. Let's pause to discuss that. What appears to be, if it's an okay word, what appears to be the last sticking point in the journey of our policy towards approval. So how is this going to work? And I think
That's your point.
I'm sorry?
That's where we're hung up.
You're right on.
You're right on.
All right. Now, in the policy in front of you, item 6.1.1. As we understand your discussions and your concerns that were raised at the December 18th meeting, you were taking issue or challenging how this particular policy statement was written. How will this whole policy work again when it gets out into the real world? Now, our feeling was, well, let me back up. That particular policy statement, as it is written, came from the earlier drafts, and it was put right into this draft and was drafted in those words with the understanding that I mentioned earlier that the community development model, or the volunteer organization that brought this forward, would continue to be involved in the governance and management of the policy. And then the parallel track to that, of course, is that BSA has taken on the actual production work of a number of events, and you're all familiar with that whole granting business that has greatly benefited, I believe, the arts and culture programming in town. So back to the 6.1.1, the Beaumont Society for the Arts feels that efficient and effective and time-conscious methods to manage arts and cultural programming requires the establishment of a Beaumont Arts Council. And what we have proposed and what you have in front of you was how we thought that that would be the best way to accomplish effective and efficient management of the provisions of the policy. So I think we can all agree that that's the goal of that particular item, that a Beaumont Arts Council needs to be established. And we believe further that the mandate of the Beaumont Arts Council will necessarily include a number of things. First, coordination of a great variety of artistic and cultural events planned on an annual basis by the arts and culture sector. And by that we mean, by coordination, we mean calendar coordination and artistic direction, particularly where gaps exist in that programming or where new initiatives are developed. And I might add that over the last year, and I'm sure my colleagues would agree, we've seen an explosion come to us of groups and individuals and artists who want to come to Beaumont and put on a show or be involved in some cultural event. And we have had, it has been a great challenge for us just to deal with that on a day-to-day basis and to deal with it in a timely fashion. And perhaps we can come back to the timeliness factor, which is very important a little bit later. But let me conclude my what I'm discussing here. So the mandate of the Beaumont Arts Council will include coordination, budget development, and requests, of course, for Beaumont City Council. This is, we see as a primary function of the Arts Council to deal with all of that financial and administrative side. That, of course, would include full financial accountability for the funds, howsoever they may come. Would include, full programming transparency and responsiveness to sectoral needs. And this is the timeliness factor that we will talk further about. There will be a need for the Beaumont Arts Council to provide regular reporting with recommendations to City Council. And we could keep going with that, but that gives you an idea of the functions that we see falling within the structure of the Beaumont Arts Council. Another factor that has to be considered, of course, and one of the reasons we wrote that particular 6.1.1 the way it was, is that the Arts Council will require legal standing in some way. Because we're dealing with public funds, it has to be done by a body that has legal standing and has the accountability requirements of a legal organization. So the intent of item 6.1.1 as it was written, that is as a subset of the BSA, that was how we conceived it. It was conceived as an effective method of establishing the Arts Council within an existing and related legal structure. There are, we recognize, many pros, many positives to doing it this way, but we recognize equally that there are some negatives to doing it this way. In the absence of a perfect system, we felt that this was a good way to deal with it. Now, at its 18 December meeting, and unfortunately no BSA representation was present, but at your meeting of 18 December, we understand that City Council discussed and has subsequently arrived at the conclusion that the Beaumont Arts Council should rather be structured and incorporated as a committee of City Council. Now, this has taken on, for us at least, because we weren't present at that meeting, and in the intervening time, the last, 9 weeks, I guess, we've heard all sorts of rumors and things going on that this creation of a committee of City Council has already happened, at least amongst yourselves. I have to treat that as what a court of law would call hearsay evidence, because I was under the impression that we were coming here tonight to discuss that and to perhaps move on from that. So I hope that that is not the case, because I believe strongly that we need to discuss that very item what is going to be the best and most efficient and most responsive structure for the Arts Council to work. I'm not married, and I don't think the Beaumont Society for the Arts is married to any one or the other. We simply want it to be effective and responsive, however that comes. Now, if I understand correctly how council committees work, and I would like a better understanding because I have many questions about the structure and functioning of council committees, my current impression is that a committee of council structure for the Beaumont Arts Council would also carry many positives, but would also present some negatives to some of them. So where we're at this juncture, I expect that our collective inclination is to stop here and thrash out the different approaches and decide on one or the other. Or perhaps third or fourth alternatives and then come to a conclusion. I submit that the outcome of such a discussion is important enough that it should be given an adequate amount of reflection, research, and discussion. Then we are collectively able to do so at this particular table at this particular time. So in concluding my remarks at this time, I would like to submit to you some recommendations as to how to move forward in a positive direction. And I would like to submit 3 recommendations to you, and if I may, I wrote these up so that again we're all proceeding from the same page. And I'll wait for you all to receive that, and then I will go through these and explain why you're getting these recommendations. My belief at this point in time is that the arts policy, as Mr. Hiltz mentioned, and has been mentioned several times, it has come to this table many times before. We have refined it. I do not believe that 6.1.1 is a sticking point enough that it should negate the approval of the policy until 6.1.1 is resolved. So my recommendations hopefully will get us past that point, and recommendation 1 is to change the wording of item 6.1.1 in the draft of the policy that you have to read. The Beaumont Arts Council will be formed by Beaumont in collaboration with the Beaumont Society for the Arts. Terms of reference for the Beaumont Arts Council will be prepared that are acceptable to and approved by both Beaumont and the Beaumont Society for the Arts. The terms of reference will address, and I should have in there minimally, mandates and mission for the Art Council, governance of the Arts Council, management of the Arts Council, both in terms of operational management and financial management, membership of the Arts Council, and an implementation plan, annual operations, including strategic plans, long-range and short-term implementation and operational plans. So that, I believe, recommendation number 1, would allow the arts policy to move forward to approval. If I am correct in assuming that there are no other policy statements that require discussion. And with the understanding that then subsequently, that's recommendation number 2. That wording does not commit to one type of management structure for the Arts Council over another. It simply says we will meet, and I believe, I have faith that we can come to an agreement as to how it should be and what is the best way. But I believe I need more, a better understanding of a committee of council, and perhaps we all can benefit from a discussion of that sort. So item number 2, then, I believe with that change in wording of 6.1.1, we could submit the revised arts policy document to City Council for approval at the earliest possible convenience for all concerned parties. And thirdly, then, to follow up on that we schedule formal discussion sessions between representatives of the Beaumont Society for the Arts, City Council, and City Administration, because I believe they should be at the table as well, to begin the creation of terms of reference for the Beaumont Arts Council. and those terms of reference then will determine the nature and function of the Beaumont Arts Council, whether it becomes a committee of council or whether it is governed in some other way. And I believe that then would give us the leeway to proceed with the approval of the arts policy. It also gives us room to continue with the planning of programming, arts and cultural programming, and to look to the future. Plus, it will provide a forum for the proper development, I think, of the terms of reference for the Beaumont Arts Council. I believe this actually is a better way than what we had originally planned for the terms of reference. We were going to draft a draft and bring that here for discussion, but I think it would be better if we did it in a more intensive, perhaps focus group discussion session and look at the pros and cons of all of the alternative structures that are there. I believe strongly that it is more important to get it right the first time rather than getting it soon for the sake of convenience. And that would be, well, thank you for listening. That's my
Mr. Tory, can I just clarify that I understand what you're recommending, because I think I do. You gave a very great comprehensive review of everything, and I appreciate that. If we were to accept the recommendations that you proposed, and we don't vote on things here, but generally that's the direction that we're going into the administration, are you suggesting that the entire policy is going to be revised based on number one? Because there are parts of this, for example, 641 and 651 that talk about funding, but financial is in the terms of reference. So I'm just wondering what we would be directing the administration. Would we be just changing 611, or would we be suggesting that you would be looking again with the administration at the financial pieces? Because I have to tell you, I have questions about what they mean. And I want to have that discussion tonight if I can, just to clarify it. Mandate is definitely number one. We do have to get that role figured out. So that's my question, and maybe Mr. Hills can help. I'm just wondering what this actually means. Are we accepting everything else but 611?
That was my impression, that the discussion on the other 5 policy statements there was no direction from the December 18th meeting that come up from for further
Operational
discussion.
funding was mentioned.
It was operational funding was discussed.
Then fine.
So
No,
that's
yeah.
my point. I think I don't want to. The work you've done here is great, and I think you do need to go away and look at the terms of reference more thoroughly. But I want to ask some questions about the funding.
Fine. Yes. No objections.
Your Worship.
Okay, let's let's slow down and frame where we're at. Because first of all, I think we need the policy to get done. I like this for 6.11 because that allows us some time to clarify like the big questions that I had in my mind surrounding it. We do have to have a little chat about 6.4, but I don't think putting financial operation in 6.1 is going to change 6.4 because the formula is basically talked about. 6.4 for me was more of an implementation thing, and because it's a big number coming for a budget that possibly has a tax increase associated to it. So it's more of an implementation thing, which will get dealt with as you go in terms of reference and how it's done. But the bigger thing was in relation to structure. Where is that? How does that Beaumont Arts Council fit within the BSA and within the council, and who's going to run it? Because from my mind, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I had seen 2 hats that might have been sort of counterproductive. I had seen the BSA because we gave you a grant and you put on programming, and that's all good. But then you now have control of the Beaumont Arts Council, which is supposed to have this, in my mind, has an overarching effect on arts and culture in the whole community, and not just what the BSA is putting on programming. Mm-hmm. And so if the programming gods over here had a chat with the control gods over here, is where was that line, and how is that crossed, and how is the governance? So I'm pretty much a fan of this because that allows us to explore that and fix those governance structures and put it in, because you're right. There's pros to having you guys do it and continue managing it, and there's also cons. And one of the big cons that I see is volunteer organizations. And I don't mean to denigrate volunteer organizations. I've been a part of them for 20, 25 years. But volunteers tend to have a 3 to 5 year lifespan. And if the organizations don't life cycle, then they go down. And I'm going to use the Beaumont Soccer Association as a grand example. 7 years ago, I went into an AGM. There was 3 people on the board, currently on the board, that said, yeah, if we don't get more help, we're out, because 2 of them were leaving. And so there was 7 of us in the room, and 4 of us walked out as the new board and had to regrow that organization. And that was one of my concerns, is we need to look at a forward-thinking 30-year sustainable model. And if it came under council, we can do that. If it runs under the BSA, what's to say that you guys are not going to have the same problem the Soccer Association had come 5, 10, 15 years from now, and all of a sudden you're down, and now we're looking for volunteers to sort of run it. And so I think this gives us a good opportunity to explore that and see how that would work and put fixes in and address those concerns and move us forward. And so, yeah, I think this is a great recommendation.
Other comments? Councillor Moncalves-Swain.
So, firstly, thank you for the presentation. All the man and woman hours that have gone into getting us here, certainly appreciate that. The question off the top, who's ultimately responsible for the provision of arts? Is it the city, or is it through the BAC/BSA? My personal view is that it should be through the BAC and the BSA, not through the city, and I just want to put that out there now to kind of set my tone anyway. I personally didn't have any concerns or comments with the policy where we're at today. Now you've introduced this, so I will have a question. I would respectfully disagree that with both of you in the fact that we need to change the wording on 6.1.1. I think we're so close to getting here. I think we're ready tonight to be able to have that discussion about whether it's a committee of council, we're a sitting member or not, whether we're a voting member or not. I think we've had this for so long that I think it's time that we can actually get it right. You talked about getting it right versus the convenience of getting it done early. I think we're at that point where we can have that discussion here today. So I don't see the need to, because all this is going to do is going to go back, and then we're going to have this exact same conversation when we go through the terms of reference. I get the need to pass the policy, but I think the things that are holding us up is this a committee of council, or is this a council out here where a member is non-voting? I think if we can clarify that around this table, I'd like us to try and get that done. And if we can't solve that, then maybe look at this. But I don't want to default to, we're not going to have that decision made tonight, because I think just in talking with folks around the table that we're pretty close there. We're not certainly all aligned, I'll say that. But I think we need to provide that direction, or else we're just going to have this conversation again in a month, 2 months' time, whenever we dive into the terms of reference. So I personally don't have a concern with the way that it's worded right now, and I'd like us, instead of trying to create, redraft the policy here, I'd rather us just, can we have the discussion on 6.1.1 as it is right now, and if we can't, then maybe we default back to that. But to me, we're missing an opportunity here to be able to nail that down. So those are my comments.
Thank you, and I would half agree with both of you, partly because what I'm reading in the first 2 sentences of your recommendation is that it's in collaboration with. And to me, that's what this is. And that's why it's so difficult, right? Those are the hardest things to figure out. And what I didn't read in the existing policy, I didn't read it that way. It sounded much more as if it was, I'm trying to find the exact wording, the mandate, I have the right word for it.
Terms of reference,
yeah, that basically it's the Beaumont Arts Council is under the Beaumont Society for the Arts. To me, it's a collaboration of City Council and the Beaumont Society for the Arts creating the Beaumont Arts Council. So I like the wording better in what you presented here, but the part I agree with Mayor on is that I'm okay with the terms of reference with the details coming later. In fact, I said this early on when you came. I think we tried to do too much too soon by putting operational pieces into policy. And if I could turn back the clock, that's what I'd try to take out of there. Yes. Because there's things in there, I do have questions about the funding. I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, but I just want to know how much that is, because is it reasonable? And you brought up a number, which I had forgotten, around the 200,000 shortfall. So is that what this number is? Is it 200,000 a year? Is that what it comes out to? I don't know the scope of that number.
Well,
So-
I don't either.
Do you, Mr. Hills? Could you maybe enlighten me? Because I just want to know whether that's feasible, because I'm thinking from the arts community's point of view, is it enough money that's actually going to make sense?
So your question is, given the current ratio in what's presented there, what would that
What's
number be
that
today?
number look like? Just give me, I know it changes, but could you, Mr. Hills?
So we're probably, so overall to the committee is we're probably looking at $150,000 to $200,000 shortfall right now. Basically based on the 2017 was the last time we went through this exercise. So we have the 2018 numbers, we'd have to kind of go through it again. So basically based on this is what we did was we looked at all of we kind of looked at our overall parks recreation budget, the $10 million budget. And we broke that down into those programs and services and everything else that was involved with recreation, would positively impact the development and delivery of arts and culture in the community, our events, our community programs, our grants, everything. That number came out to just over $2 million. And that was out of that 10 million.
Current going into?
Current. And so we did that 1 to 3 ratio. At 2.1, you're looking at just over $600,000. And so basically, so then what we did, so we found out, so that ratio, that target number was, let's say, $600,000. So then we looked at all of the programs and services that the town positively impacts arts and culture on. And so that's the granting money we give Blues and Roots, the Beaumont Society of the Arts, grant programs that go directly to arts and culture services, our community events, things like that. We came up with a number of about 450,000. So we were short. That's the gap. And so in our discussions with the BSA was they were okay with taking 4 or 5 years to make up that gap, that $200,000. And basically we weren't looking at they were going to get that money. That money was going to be then used for how do we enhance the arts in the community. So we would have to be then doing more, either granting more funding out, doing more arts and culture programs ourselves, working doing more events and things like that to make up that shortfall. So that's basically where that kind of came from.
So then, where's the operational funding?
Well, that could come into that effect as well. We hadn't, but that's got to be a direction of council, is that they want to go there. And then we'd have to kind of look at how does that impact all of the groups in the community.
Mr. Mayor and then councillors.
And here's why I'm excited about this, because this will get the policy passed, which will allow us to get the nuts and bolts of actually forming the Beaumont Arts Council going. And it will allow us to more keenly go through and figure out what the financial impacts are and what the mandates and the scope are. And we'll have a better coherency on around what this is going to cost and what it's going to take to execute. And then we can actually make budget decisions based on terms of reference versus the formula, which is great from a philosophical point of view, but I'm more apt to approve budget for nuts and bolts than I am to approve physical. So like, I gotta be honest, this excites me. This allows this project to move forward at speed. So.
Okay, Councillor Milko-Swing, thank you.
So I don't think it does that, because 6.4 talks about the municipal fund. So if you just pass it, if you just say 6.1.1, if we just do that, you've still got 6.4, which talks about the 34 cents. So I'm not sure why we're still on this, but we are. So then we'd need to go and you'd need to look at 6.4, because if you approve the policy with just the wording here, then we are committing to 34 cents, 3-to-1 ratio and all that sort of thing, right? And so I guess my point, I'll try and refocus the conversation. There's a lot of work that was put into preparing the briefing note that was in front of us, and there are some good key questions that I think that we need to go through and answer that way, as opposed to, I respectfully, we've heard that answer 15 times about how we get that number. And so I just think if we go back to the briefing note, there are some key questions here that maybe if we can answer those as a group, then that can drive out some of the responses that we actually need to pass this. So instead of us going forward and throwing out questions about the thing, can we just follow the briefing note that is provided to us? Have the discussion that you've tried to, it looks like you've put the time and effort for us to, the key questions there. And then once we've answered those, then if there are still things that are holding us up, then, we'll stay here till midnight to get them done so that we can approve the policy. But we just need to, I just think we need to focus in on that briefing note.
Councillor, with all due respect, we were handed something different. And so as the chair, I was approaching it from this perspective, knowing full well we have this here as well. So the floor was open and different questions were asked. So I just want to make sure that this, we are on track. We are looking at the role, and I think that's the first discussion we are having. Mr. Hills, could you add you were going to ask something or add some value there?
It's a 641. One of the things that's kind of always been coming up, and this has been over the last few years regarding the policy, and it was a question that was asked by the previous council, and it's continuing being asked by this council, is that it's the question of the funding will be part of a 3-to-1 ratio, and that continues to come up. And like my suggestion would be to remove that sentence from the policy, and then that would come out into when the committee is working through the operational plan and the terms of reference and things like that. That's when that discussion really takes place. Basically, that would allow Beaumont will assist in revision and dedication, will provide funding. These activities are defined positive impact in the arts and culture in Beaumont directly delivered. So I think there's opportunity by maybe removing that from the initial policy, having those discussions as Mr. Tolley was talking about through the terms of reference and the mandate and things. If council's comfortable with the 3-to-1 ratio, then that's great. That can stay. But if it is something that is one of those parts, if it's written in the policy, that is the direction that we take. So if people aren't comfortable with it, because they need to be comfortable, then that's another approach or another way of looking at it.
As we know, we don't vote here tonight, so this is a bit of a challenge in terms of making sure everyone has their point of view on the table. And we are on roll. So in terms of, before we go to that funding, to Councillor Monkoff-Swain's point, how do we want to leave this one? It's one point of view is to accept the changes, and the other is to go with this. And since we can't vote, how do you want to handle this?
Oh.
2 points of view.
Well, direction's direction.
Direction's
we basically
direction.
we get direction. Even if you don't really vote on it, we get a sense. We do get a very strong sense.
We're split on this one, I think, at this point in time. So that's where I'm kind of caught.
Just one observation. I think, if we take out 6.1.1, we take out the 34 cents, someone's going to want to take out the 1%. What are we passing here? Like, it's just going to be a document, and then we're going to wait to get into the, if we want to pass some policy, let's just hammer it out and pass the details that if we're not prepared to do it for whatever reason, then let's take the time. But let's not pass a policy that doesn't mean anything, because it's just going to be a piece of paper, and then we're going to have to go through and hammer this out through terms of reference. So I respect what you're trying to do, Mr. Tolley here, and trying to get us to move down, but I mean, at the end of the day, if we just say that the policy is just, Beaumont commits to working with the Beaumont Society of the Arts to increase, et cetera, then that doesn't really leave you with anything. It doesn't give us any direction. It doesn't help administration. So I know where you're trying to go, and you're trying to get some consensus here, and I just don't think that's where we're at.
Councillor Dunlop, and then Councillor Dunlop.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just maybe just a point of order for a moment. Could we just for a moment make the assumption that we just take this policy in front of us right now and we approve it to go forward? Now, you made a comment, Mr. Tully, that you believe future negotiations will take place to be mutually satisfactory to both sides to get the term reference, all that sort of stuff taken care of. So if we pass the policy, if we took this policy forward and we passed it, then go down the path of terms of reference and operational discussions, such as 6.4 and so on. If you reach an impasse at that point, you guys dig your heels in, we dig our heels in, we can't agree on terms of reference, the whole thing can just die at that point. I'm not saying it's going to. I'm going through the reference notes here, and it talks about, and I believe it's correct, policy should be established first. Reference notes saying community development should be allowed community groups to build capacity towards success, give them tools to succeed. So I should get my head around the fact that if we did take this policy and passed it, We can then still negotiate the terms of reference down the point between our mutual groups. If it doesn't go anywhere, then the whole thing just dies at that point. I'm not saying it's going to. I believe it will, as you suggested, find common ground and negotiate. But my understanding is supposed to get the policy done tonight first. Then the rabbit hole details of operational will come after the fact. Am I correct in that assumption procedurally?
So you don't need to see changes, you're prepared to accept it as it is?
I'm not saying, I'm saying just for the
Okay,
point
I'm
of
just trying to
argument
get the
saying,
straw poll going.
just a
Okay.
point of argument saying if we did approve this right now and process-wise, and we can't negotiate terms of reference that everyone's happy with.
Well, and I don't think that's where we want to go. I think we
No, I
want to
agree.
get
I'm
this
just
to a
trying to get my head
point
around
where
because we're asked to maybe look at
Yeah.
policy first,
Right.
then
So
terms of
let's try to
reference.
get it done today.
This one here mandates the policy that we do the terms of reference, and do this as a group and get it all done so it's right, so it lasts 30 years.
Right.
That does not say that as it currently reads.
The five,
Correct.
yeah. that
The
one would
revised
have to
6.11
change.
says that. Yes, I agree with that.
So you'd be in favor of changing 611?
Feel free to weigh in.
Let me hear from the councillors first, please. Councillor Van Newkirk?
Couple things. First, to just address one of the comments made during the presentation. I can assure you that I didn't have my mind made up on anything coming into the meeting tonight. So just so you're very clear with that, and it's publicly stated. Secondly, I was not coming to the meeting tonight to kick the can down the road. I thought we were going to make some decisions on the policy moving forward, or try and work through some of the impasse that might have existed. I guess third, one of the questions that pops up for me in the terms of reference piece, and I guess just maybe a clarification, Mr. Hilt. So the policy tonight moves forward, or direction moves forward, let's say, then there's a terms of reference. The terms of reference is going to speak to membership. It's going to speak, does it speak to all the pieces that are presented here?
Yeah.
Anyways?
Yes, it would do that for mandate, mission, governance, membership, annual operating, etc. And you could have operational and financial. That's kind of you could have just a mother statement on management, like who manages it, or you could go into the actual operation and financial as well, details. So these are kind of your high level terms of reference points.
Yeah. So I guess where I'm struggling in my mind right now is, I guess, the process on what we're trying to decide tonight. Because if we start talking about changing 6.1, then we're doing the crafting policy on the fly piece, perhaps. If we accept an amended 6.1, then, and I'm just thinking out loud here, then we're kicking the can down the road for all these items, but those items have to be decided upon in terms of reference anyways. So really, we haven't created any more work for ourselves, I guess.
No, I was going to say to council or to committee is that as 6.11 is written, it actually is crafted quite well in terms of it does say the same thing as the modified statement in a sense. But it's a little bit more direct because basically at the end of it says one member of Beaumont Council will be appointed to the Beaumont Arts Council. It doesn't say if they would be, it doesn't say voting, non-voting. That's where the terms of reference comes in. And that's what we're trying to do. But then it kind of got into this at the 18th meeting of December, it kind of got into this. Two members, like it really got all over the place. And we didn't have the BSA here to defend anything. And I was put into a position where I can't speak for them, even though I had information, I couldn't speak for them. So this was kind of to get that clarity, and I think with the BSA, what they're trying to do with this amendment is they're really wanting to get the policy in place to give them some assurance that we're going to move forward. So if 6.11 is works, then that works, because basically I think we still need to have that that facilitated meeting on the terms of reference. So that's, I really think that that's a strong statement.
Something that you just said, because you're helping me to get my head around this, because 6.11 is the actual policy that's before us. On page 56 of 64, which is the interpretation in the request for decision, that's what threw me off. I honestly have to tell you that's not what you just said.
So 56 of 64,
Number one, Where, the second bullet, it says, "The Beaumont Arts Council will be formed and managed under the bylaws of the Beaumont Society for the Arts." And so, to me, that's a very different statement than what, so, I don't want to, I'm not looking for trouble, I just want to make sure we get this nailed at the beginning here. Because I just like the way it's worded better in the policy than the way it's worded here, but if I'm not interpreting it correctly, then I want to make sure I ask.
May I just point out that the only difference between the way that it's worded in the policy and the way that it's worded in my recommended change is that the recommended change version allows for the management to come under a committee of council, if that's the direction that it goes.
And that's, personally, I don't think it needs to be there, but I like the verbiage there, which allows for council to, be part of the equation, not to have it be totally divorced from council, because I don't think that's where you want to go.
No, and that
my experience tells me you don't want to go far away from council. You want to be a creature of the city of Beaumont, because there's security there. So I like the word collaboration. And I like what's in the policy. The interpretation of it threw me. So that's now I understand where I went off. Councillor Van Uycker?
Yeah, so just kind of to finish up my thought, when we're looking at the policy in front of us right now, so respectfully, we've had 2 or 3 opportunities to comment as council on the funding piece, the 0.34 and the 3-to-1. So I would suggest that if anyone has a concern with that, bring it up. I didn't bring it up the last couple of times because I think we need that. And secondly, if the terms of reference is going to contain the pieces which are going to require more conversation anyways, which is membership, which is all those pieces that are here, then I think it's fairly simple exercise tonight to try and give some direction to move the policy forward here.
You wouldn't change anything, or would you take the suggested changes from Mr.?
No, I think just thinking through it here holistically and listening to what everyone has to say, I think that what's in front of us and the fact that we have terms of reference yet to come together should satisfy any questions that folks may have, unless there's someone else who feels strongly about one of these pieces. But if we're talking about membership and who's on the BSA board versus the BAC board, terms of reference is going to talk about that. If we're talking about voting or non-voting in membership piece, then that's going to have to be clarified in the terms of reference anyways. That's I'm rambling now, so thank you.
So the one word that may help you, Madam Chair, is that on the 6.11 is the last sentence there where it says Beaumont Society of the Arts in consultation with Beaumont. I would change that word from consultation to collaboration, and then that makes it a stronger
if I'm the only holdout, I'm pushing this to make sure everybody's clear.
I think collaboration would be a word that they would
I
accept.
like that word. Maybe it could be in the terms of reference if it's not passed here, but I'm okay with the existing policy the way it is, but I haven't heard from everyone yet. So Councillor Danlow.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Hills, if you don't mind maybe clarifying for me. So on the overall cover page here, it's well written, by the way. Consideration, is ultimately responsible for the provision of arts and artistic programs in the community. That's a fundamental question, right?
Yeah.
And the services of the BSA and BAC are different from Blues Roots Festival, for example, where council has all the control of the grant, but the Blues Roots Festival actually does the event.
Yeah.
So if you can just indulge me for a moment, 6.1 the way it's written, or 6.11 the way it's written, does that mean that the city has the ultimate responsibility, or the council has ultimate responsibility? I'm interpreting this policy as I'm reading it, that the council has the ultimate responsibility to deliver arts in or am I missing something there? I need to get,
You're right.
I believe that's what it is, and I'm okay with that, because at the end of the day, with council having the control of the money, you by default have control of everything, right? But
That's
I'm
the
not sure we
hammer.
need to have council hands in running the arts program. I'm trying to get my head around this interpretations here.
So this is very similar to what we would do with a lot of different community groups, for example, from minor hockey to ball to the Blues and Roots Festival to et cetera. We provide them the tools. Right. We facilitate the tools that they can basically go out there and they can make Beaumont the best Beaumont can be. Like by, they schedule the field, they're scheduling the ice, they're booking the tournaments, they're setting the practices, they're doing all that. This is very similar to what, I think the BSA has been working towards through the community development. They see us as a very important part of that process because we would be one of the major contributors for funding, and we would have a very strong voice too, and at any time during budget and stuff like that, that could be changed very quickly. But I think ultimately, if I'm not speaking, on behalf of the BSA here, I think ultimately they would like to be responsible for the delivery of arts in the community with the support and, with the support of Beaumont moving forward. However, if it is something that comes a different, that's where that discussion needs to take place. We really need to get that answered, even from a staff perspective moving forward, because it's going to impact operations and everything else from a very significant way.
Okay, so if I may, just on that point, so just to clarify for my own purposes, and I apologize if anyone else already has this, but 6.11, the way it's written, I believe puts the onus for delivery of arts programming and arts on the council, not on city council.
Yeah, the Arts Council, correct.
Correct. Okay, thank you very much.
And if that also means, I don't think it does necessarily, that the money is not necessarily transferred from the city of Beaumont, hosts everything that we spend on the arts, but there's advice and input as to where the money is spent, and the gauge is, in fact, that's the language used, is the 1/3. So responsible in terms of growing arts in the community, but all of the money doesn't come from, like if the Arts Council didn't spend it on something, it didn't mean that the city didn't spend it on something. But the Arts Council has a say and input everything that it's spent on. There's a difference. I mean, saying it's responsible, but the money comes from the taxpayers.
Yes.
But I'm saying, I'm still I know they're very similar, but this one allows a stronger conversation to be had so that we can set this thing up properly so that it life cycles for 30 years. And they may get into the discussions and find out that the best way is to have arts under the Arts Council under the BSA, or we may come through it and decide that it's the best place to just to run it as council, administration, and BSA becomes advisors. So I think we need to have that conversation in depth, and I don't think we're going to be able to settle that tonight because I can't settle tonight. Like I would love to see all arts programs run by students because it's less staff for us, it's less.
So I guess my follow-up point is that if the current
is that realistic?
And that's not what, so that's what I just clarified, and I probably didn't say it as well as, you didn't hear what I was trying to get at. We are not giving over all of the arts funding to the Arts Council by this. That's not how I read it, and they're confirming that.
That's not how I'm reading it either.
That's right.
Okay, so we are still providing arts in the community in different ways through different groups. So I'm not hearing then what your concern is with the existing policy.
I like the way it's worded better.
You just
because
like the
it lays
wording?
it out better. Who's going to do what, systems are
But it doesn't change that fundamental point is still,
Yeah.
the city is going to continue to be involved in the arts, but the Arts Council is going to have a responsibility to ensure it grows and
the way it's
thrives.
the way it's currently written, though. It should be as much as we just give them a grant and walk away. That's the way but I think you need to sit down and strike the committee and.
So I've got a couple of people wanting in, and this is good. I think we're at the nub of it.
Finish up if you don't mind.
Okay, Mr. Holt wanted to add something there, so go ahead.
I think further to what the mayor had indicated here, it says, and this is in the 6.11, the mandate, terms of reference, management and operation protocols for the Beaumont Arts Council will be prepared by the Beaumont Society of the Arts in collaboration with Beaumont. So that means that we're doing what this basically says, that we're going to be working through these things together.
The compromise for me would change consultation to collaboration. And
Yeah, I think collaboration is the new word there.
I mean, that's,
And I think that for
I can get out of others.
the funding one is we can put that clause back in here that was here on the December 18th, one that basically just says, that clarifies the money situation of where it goes. That's easy to do.
Well, my follow-up is going to be, is that Thank you for that clarification, Mr. Hill. So if 6.11 as currently written specifies ultimate responsibility, answer that question. 6.11 says ultimate responsibility for delivery of the services of the arts is with the Arts Council, not with City Council. And if that's what 6.11 says, then the amendment Mr. Tully presented should have the same responsibility. It's not the city.
Yeah, but it's in, once again, it's
Collaboration.
who's the master?
Right.
If the council goes down, who picks it up? Is it the BSA? If the BSA goes down, who picks it up?
That's why collaboration is a key word for me, because
I
we're
know what
both.
you're saying.
Councillor Monkhouse-Swain?
So I guess my question, and I appreciate the history you've had with some of the volunteer organizations, but whether it's a council, whether it's committee of council, whether it's committee outside of council, membership's going to fall off. It can happen either way, right? So I get the history there, and we need to make sure that we do our best to encourage that, but I don't think that the policy changes it. I can't see what anything here in 6.11 is gonna change that. I think, again, I respect the history you've had there, but the way it's written to me here, it's very vague in the sense that a member is going to be appointed to the council. So great, I think we all agree on that. We need to figure out if that's a voting member or non-voting member. And again, in here it says will be determined. Terms of reference will be looked at, right, in collaboration with Beaumont. So it's all there. I don't know what, I can't see what the holdup is with that paragraph.
Would you be okay if the word collaboration was added in?
Oh, yeah, it doesn't, yeah.
You could live with that?
Consultation, collaboration, yeah, that makes, it doesn't worry me at all.
How are others feeling right now? Councillor Stout, I don't know where you're at with this.
Oh, I'm having difficulty seeing what the problem actually is, really.
You're comfortable with it as it is?
As long as there's a majority on council that are comfortable with it, then yes. And as regards 611, I'm certainly happy to pass the modified suggested version that Mr. Tully's proposed. But against that, from what I've just heard in the discussion, there really isn't very much difference between the two.
No, I think it's...
If we substitute one word,
Still
I'm happy to substitute the word.
For me, it's more clear here than here.
You want the whole thing changed with,
I
with
want-
all of the bullets?
Because it lays it out. It lays it out
In
a
the
very
policy.
specific manner in the policy. What has to happen. This is still vague. This is clear for me. And maybe I'm the only one stuck in the vagueness of it.
So
but
far you are, but I haven't heard from
That's-
Councillor Hendricks.
That's good enough reason, I think. I want everybody here to be happy with this and ensure that this meets that it has their full support. I'd like this to pass unanimously when it eventually comes up, ideally. So I'd like everybody to be satisfied. But I don't see what the big issue is. Yes, this is perhaps a clearer statement than the original. So, yes, Pat.
Let me just hear from Councillor Hendricks.
On the funding formula, the 641, I specifically raised that on December the 18th. I specifically asked Council if anybody had any problems with that they wanted to raise, and nobody responded that they did. I think you all remember that.
that one's not a sticking point for me.
So
It's
I
just
don't
the
see that that's
implementation
the
of
sticking
how fast we
Mandate
get
and,
there.
responsibility was
There's no
the
time
primary
limit.
issue,
Yes, agreed.
and the operational.
And yes, we have to sort out the reporting, the terms of reference, the reporting structure, what the role of council is or isn't within the Beaumont Arts Council. But that's effectively to be decided later, as I understand this.
Okay, so I'm summarizing what I hear you say is that you could live with it as is, but you could also live with the changes. You don't see a significant difference between the two.
No, not really. Not from the debate that I've just heard. Is there some difference that?
Is-
I don't-
what in your mind,
I-
Mr. Hill? I'm sorry, Councillor Hendricks, I'll get to you yet.
I'm,
Clarify this.
What I said earlier, probably about a half an hour ago, is that I think 6.11 is a well-written statement. It stands on its own with that change from consultation to collaboration. Basically, to me, it does say the same thing as what Mr. Tully had proposed. I think he was proposing that just as kind of a Hail Mary tonight to move us along, to get the policy approved. We can, if council seems, if committee members are relatively comfortable with this will come back the March 12th meeting We could, Mr. Tully and myself can look at this a little bit more with the BSA, and a couple words can maybe be changed, but I think it is a really strong statement.
Let's hear from one remaining councillor who hasn't weighed in on this one. Councillor Hendricks, do you have any questions or comments at this point?
Well, we sit on the promotions committee and have for many years. And last term, we went through the entire terms of reference process, 4 years. And at times quite a loud session. But ultimately, it's kind of eerie that we're basically the same document in front of us today. If you take what the promotions committee that came up with at the end and what this document does, outside of funding, everything else is the same. So I think we're at the finish line. I agree wholly with Councillor Stout. Doesn't matter. 6.11 either way, with some word changes. This idea that there was some kind of committee decision is a bit strange, and I also concur with Councillor Stephen and that there was never a discussion or any kind of, and I don't know, I understand where rumors start from.
That's rumors.
And certainly there's tape of that meeting, so we can play it back, read it. That doesn't happen, that didn't exist. So that aside, doesn't matter to me. Committee of Council, I think is also interesting because it gives it some strength. Gives it a safety net. Makes sure it's in perpetuity. Not, then you just rely on the individuals involved. Hope that they're all around long enough, stick it out long enough, and that they have the volunteerism to stick it out, so that if it does come down to one person at the end, that person's got the wherewithal to pull all this off. So the committee of council gives you a lot more strength. That's all. But if you really want to be independent, you need to be independent, then it's okay.
So the question before us is to go with the new wording or accept the old. Councillor Van Nieuwkerk?
I was just going to point out what Councillor Hendricks said there, like the terms of reference, there's nothing to say in the terms of reference. You can't put succession planning into it and address that. You know? So, yeah.
And evaluation and all kinds of things. Yes, Mr. Schwartz.
Just from a process perspective, from the administration's point of view, we're getting some fairly clear direction here. I don't know that we need to have the debate on the new or the old 6.1. The mayor seems to be the one person that's objecting to the 6.4. So when this comes back to regular council, we can have that discussion. I think we've got our direction.
To be clear, I'm not objecting to 6.4. I just need an implementation plan for it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hearing that we need an implementation and the terms of reference, which we already
Which is
knew,
in both policy
are
statements.
coming.
Yeah.
The word collaboration somewhere in there would make me happier, but that's just hearing that. But I don't think there's significant disagreement. But one thing I did pick up as the mayor was talking is that when the administration and the Arts Council looks at this again, they'll be looking at governance and management and operation. So it opens up the conversation to get into the detail, which I think we know. So I'm a little worried about the changes myself because I think it opens up the whole discussion all over again, and a lot of work's already been done. So I'm leaning towards accepting it as is and come back with an implementation plan. But again, you're going to take direction, and we're not going to be voting. Councillor Hunkov-Swain.
So, given the fact we've been at this for a while, one of the key questions that we've kind of danced around and Pierre just spoke to it pretty eloquently there is community council or not. We're all kind of fired up and ready we're in that mode now. Can we have that discussion so we can help provide direction for the terms of reference development? Because I think that's going to be one of the key hold-ups is on that. So can we get some sort of discussion on that now, or we just want to say, don't worry about it, let's get the policy in and then we'll worry about it down the road?
I think that's the terms of reference committee to decide that and bring a recommendation back after they've evaluated all the pros and cons of both. To be honest with you.
My sense is that would be better if we were discussing that and had the options and the pros and cons in front of us, rather than at this point weighing in on it, because I think that takes us into that whole terms of reference discussion, membership, etc. My sense of it.
Like I say, change consultation to collaboration. I'll vote with the group because apparently I'm the only one that's confused.
But we'll see the terms of reference again. And, well, we'll see the terms of reference, so I think that's when
In the future, yeah, in the future,
the
yes.
rubber hits the road at that point, so.
So.
Final thoughts, question?
It was just, so, point 3 here, I guess is the key, and we'll rely on Mr. Hills to figure that out, but, we don't want to wait another 4 years or a full term to go through and figure out the terms of reference, right? So we'll rely on you to get that process going as quickly as possible so we can get that terms of reference in.
So no other problems with what's on this sheet then, in terms of direction, Councillor?
Terms of reference, just on the process of that, then does the terms of reference come back to council?
Yes, it'd be approved by.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Just to sum it up, I hope this is not misinterpreted. I don't think any of the councillors are opposed to this happening. I think it is in how it happens in the implementation that we can get caught up in and take our responsibility as councillors, as council very seriously. So I don't hear any disrespect or any lack of support for the initiative at all. But again, I might be looking at this from a rose-tinted political lens, but anyway, it's a...
I just wanted to correct myself a little bit. If it's a committee of council, it would come back to council for approval. If it is not a committee of council, then you guys would get to review it and as part of the whole process, but it wouldn't necessarily need council's approval if it's not a committee of council. But we can work on those details through the process.
Well, no, like we need to make the
That's a
decision.
deal breaker now then.
No.
Yeah, like we need to decide whether as a group, this group wants to be a part of committee council, will review and approve the terms of reference, or we say, no, we're okay letting this
That's what
group.
we have to have though.
Right, and that's the direction and that's why your note, going back to it, asks us to have this discussion so that you know, okay, generally, as a group, do we want to, and thanks for the clarification, would have been,
Yeah, thank you.
I know it's going ticking through your mind, and it would have been awful to walk away here going, oh shit. But I think if we have that clarification here as a group, and we'll figure out where it's going to go, but then we know, okay, yes, it is going to come back to us, or no, let's leave it as a committee that they're recommending with a non-voting member of council from more communication perspective. I think it's not a hard discussion. I lost the initial battle, but then you made that, so I'm going to fight for it one more time to have that discussion here.
Okay, well, I'm chairing the meeting for you, so what do others think on that one?
Yeah, in a collaborative process, I had envisioned whatever the decision was made coming back to both groups for approval to execute. So I don't know how we got off. The terms of reference is not going to get approved by us.
Well, I guess the question
That's
is...
part of this terms of reference discussion is how we're going to set it up.
Yeah, we'd have to build that in the policy. However, it's just basically, it's if it is, it's the difference between what an actual committee of council is and if it isn't. So basically, if you looked at other groups' terms of references for the they don't come to council for approval. But committee of council, the terms of reference or bylaw or whatever you want to call it, comes to council for approval. So that's that. So
And that's the collaboration that
Yes,
I said is
that's-
messy.
yes.
What does our
So-
collaboration look like? And to me, that's the terms of reference for
Yeah.
a collaboration, which is very different than giving money to a group and saying,
Exactly.
go off and do your
Yeah.
thing. So I think the collaboration word is what makes a difference
Yeah.
for me. And that's when you do have a terms of reference. 'Cause well, call it an agreement, call it a partnership agreement, call it something else. Don't call it terms of reference. We're partners in this. So what are the rules of the game?
So from what you're saying, you're leaning more towards a committee of council so that council can be.
No, I'm leaning towards a partnership. But the rules of that partnership are laid out in a document, whatever you want to call it terms of reference, call it a partnership agreement. I don't see it as one of our usual advisory committees. That's, to me, very different. Those are entirely creatures of council. This is a collaboration, which every collaboration I've ever worked for is different.
I think we need to hear from
Mr. Schwartz.
The suggestion I was going to throw out, maybe you can piggyback off this, Matt, is this is your policy. What's in this is approved by this council. The suggestion I would make is that you put in that either the inaugural, the first cut of the terms of reference, whatever you want to call them, comes back to this council for approval. Becomes part of the policy statement. Then we make the decision in the terms of reference whether it's a committee of council or not. And if it's not, then it follows the normal protocol of terms of reference. Because they are amended, don't come back to council. Just a suggestion that Chair was going to go to you, ask your opinion, so interrupted.
Well, to my mind and my way of thinking, the Arts Council will be coming back to this council for funding requests, recommendations for where the funding goes to various and sundry. And that very fact, I think, demands that this body have approval along the way. And I would not be comfortable actually moving forward with terms of reference that you haven't seen or agreed to, at least in principle, because you're the major funder here. So that's how I view it, is I think it would be absolutely necessary to have your at least consensus approval that this is the direction to
The
go.
very name of it, Mr. Tully, a council, is very significant. And whether
Yes.
it's a, you know, you look at Edmonton or you look at any other city that has
Yes.
an arts council, it gives it a different place.
A different
So
status.
it's
and a
not an
different-
advisory committee in the same
No.
way that other committees are advisory.
Yeah.
It has more autonomy, but not total autonomy because we're in it together.
And to my mind, it's a question of, the only big question really is, does this council, the city council, have oversight responsibility, or do they also want management responsibility? And I think for the sake of everybody, for BSA to be able to function quickly and efficiently, as I talked about earlier, having you there as the overseers, great, that works really well. And the accountability and the transparency and everything happens. We operate under an agreement with the town that the administration gives to us every year. Will be the same with the Arts Council when it's up and running. So there is oversight without day-to-day direction. Okay, and you do have opportunities to approve of the strategic plan, the operational plan, or at least to see it. So we see it that way because you're a major funder. I like the word partner. I view it that way.
Councillor Van Newkirk and then Councillor Daniluk, and then I think we're wrapping up.
The only suggestion I heard is from Mr. Schwartz around how we write in the fact that we review the terms of reference. The question is do we need to write that in? I think maybe we do. So there's clarity on the first cut of it. But beyond Mr. Schwartz's recommendation, we haven't went there yet. So this is, I think, what we have to decide upon if we're going to try and move something forward. So thoughts on that?
Not covered anywhere in here?
No, it's not, but
It
I
would be
think,
in addition.
but that would be under that.
So we're hearing from the group that, from everyone here, that the terms of reference are going to come back
Yep.
here. So I don't know if we need to write it into the policy for
In
a one-off
consultation.
thing. Like, it's going to come back. I mean, we're all recording here unless it's down
We're gonna
the
put it
road.
in.
Like, someone's listening. I think, yeah, we're good there. I think I appreciate your comments about getting, wanting to build this. You're not wanting to do this over there, and the oversight is certainly there from a budget perspective. You just, from your preference, from what I'm undertaking, and sorry if I'm summarizing words incorrectly, but you just don't want the day-to-day management of the city to be in your business. You've got your way of managing it. We have the oversight from a financial perspective, and you'll come and report back in accounts. We'll be able to have those conversations as they come up. I'm very comfortable with that, and I don't think we need to write a piece here.
Back here. The eyes in the back of your head or your chair?
No, I was asked not to speak, so
Sorry?
I won't speak.
Oh, okay. I'm distracted there. Okay, so Councillor Daniluk.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We've gone through a lot of this, the document 6.11 and 6.4 and so on. I had a couple of questions about 6.5. Briefly, question, if you don't mind. Well, I just had.
It's not midnight.
I thought it would have been a half hour that we
Okay.
would have got to this point. 6.51,
You said midnight.
Mr. Hiltz, if you wouldn't mind, please. It talks about 1% of all publicly funded new capital infrastructure expenditure. So I'm assuming, of course, a building would be like the rec center is a capital expenditure, but a road wouldn't be, right? So in the definitions part before, infrastructure was not defined. Could we define infrastructure without too much additional work, just so we know what exactly infrastructure we're applying the 1% to in this part of the document? Unless everyone else knows what infrastructure is, clearly, then that's great, but I'm assuming it's more building nature as opposed to.
So what that policy statement stands for is that basically each year we approve a capital budget.
Right.
So the bottom line capital budget, so we go through all the lines, and let's say our capital budget is $8 million, which would be $80,000 for that, but we'd capped it at $50,000. So another year it could be at $4 million for capital, so it would be $40,000 that would go into the arts. If this one year we had the BSA, the BRSC was 30 million, it's still capped at 50,000. So it's all capital, so it's the bottom line of the capital of each year.
Okay, thank you. I misinterpreted as being a specific project as opposed to the overall capital budget. My misunderstanding, I apologize. One last question is on 6.5.4. It talks about Beaumont and regional artists will be given preference. Can we not just do Beaumont artists? Like, why do we worry about the regional artists? Like, this is a Beaumont arts policy, Beaumont's Arts Council. Should we just simply not use Beaumont artists only in our just asking the question?
Mr. Tully probably has an answer for that
We
one.
can talk to that too.
Go ahead, yes. and
Through
then
our funding agreement with Leduc County, we do service the residents who live
Okay,
in the
that's
county.
good enough. That's good enough.
Regionally around Beaumont.
Well, it makes sense. I want to ask the question because maybe someone might ask, why about, okay, that answered the question.
My
nicely.
answer would just jump off of his, is that we are actively in discussions constantly with Leduc County because they surround us, and we have a number of participants in Beaumont who live in the county. So we
And every
we
good
ensure-
artist needs an audience and somebody to sell their art
That's right.
to.
That's why I just asked the question. Because I'm going to answer, why can't we be exclusive? Well, because we have other interesting considerations. That's fine, thank you.
Are we there? Do we have enough?
My last, it's not a question on this at all. Mr. Hiltz mentioned March 12th. Given the fact we're changing one word, and apologies, I know you're killing me because we've got an agenda figured out and all that sort of stuff, and it's going to be a longer meeting, but we're adding additional 3, maybe 4 weeks to this, right? And they've constantly come to us saying, get this done so that we can have our predictability and start to get our programming in place. Can we bring it forward to the 26th?
To the committee. I think where the difficulty is I need to sit down with the BSA as well, and we need to start working out some of these schedules so I can have that in the report as well, because I know they'll be asking me those questions next week, and we won't have any of that information.
So we want it as soon as possible, but we want it right. So someone said earlier, I think that's important, so we don't want to put too much pressure. Are we good?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, got enough direction? More than you asked for?
No, it's good.
Okay.
That's what
Thank you very much, Mr. Tully. And to the members of the committee, I need a motion to go in camera.
So moved.
Thank you. All in favor? All right, so we're in camera.